Okay, it is a little bit after 7 on the clock on the back wall, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the Planning Commission meeting for May 29th. Call it to order. We'll go with a roll call.
Here. Here. Here.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Caroline.
Here.
Chair Ketchum.
Here.
Commissioner Lamont.
Here.
And Commissioner Green is absent.
All right, the next item is approval of the agenda. We have a very straightforward, simple agenda tonight. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? The agenda is accepted. It looks like we have a good crowd, but I'd ask that all of you respect the meeting protocol. And if we need to remind everyone of what that is, I'll do it when we get to there. Right now, there is, on the agenda, there's public comments on non-agenda items. So if there's anyone here to speak to anything that's not on tonight's agenda, this would be the time to do it. You have 3 minutes. And name, address, and...
John Sargent, 55 Madrone Road. You know, when people come into Fairfax, almost universally they marvel at the small-town nature of our community and how neat it is with our little shopping district and everything. And that's what attracted me here 44 years ago. But since then, things have changed. Now there's a lot more congestion. There's a lot more traffic and pollution and whatever, and any additional housing just adds to that problem. You know, the plain fact...
Sir, can I ask, is this sounds like it's addressing the item that we're going to be talking about on the agenda? This is separate from the agenda item?
Separate from the item.
Okay.
Thank you. And you know, the plain fact of the matter, everybody can't live here that wants to. My wife and I live in a 600 square foot house with 1 bathroom and 1 bedroom and a cracked foundation. And if I was to sell that house right now, the proceeds wouldn't be enough for me to buy another house in Fairfax. ABAG, you know, holds out this money for us if we go along with their planning. And I'd like to, I'm not a lawyer, but I think I'm right on this. ABAG has no statutory authority to impose housing on us. What they do is dangle the money out in front of you. And there was a Fairfax council person that said after she saw a wind cup, "My God, I wish we just turned down the money." You know, you're going to have the council and the planning commission and workshops. And that's what led you down the road to the referendum. Because what happens with those kinds of meetings is a small group of people talking to themselves and convincing each other that you're right on the right path. And the referendum proved that, in fact, you were going down the wrong path with a lot of voters in Fairfax, over 1,000 voters. So I would hope that that mistake is taken into account when you have these little small workshops and everything. You know, in a democracy, we depend on our representatives to look after our interests. I know the mayor has chided me and chided other people for not participating in all these workshops and council meetings and planning meetings, and then coming across later and having this referendum. The plain fact of the matter is most of the working people in Fairfax will not be able to attend these kind of meetings, and so I don't know what the solution to that is other than more widely publicizing these meetings and including the item like is going to be on the agenda with the next item, putting it in common English so people can understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public with comments not on tonight's agenda? Okay, I'm going to close the open session, and we will move forward on to our public hearing item. I'm going to ask staff to introduce it.
All right, good evening, commissioners and people in the audience and those at home watching, either live or on tape. I'm going to summarize the staff report that was provided to you last Friday and to the public online, and then we'll field any questions. And tonight, our town manager, Garrett Toy, is here also to field any questions that might relate to the overall direction we've been given by council recently and where staff sees us going. So by way of background, if you recall, in January of this year, on January 30th, the commission held a public hearing and adopted a resolution recommending the council approve Ordinance 778. Now specifically, the ordinance converted all the commercial highway district of downtown, the bookends of downtown, if you will, to the central commercial, the center old part of town. It rezoned 4 properties to planned district development, and it rezoned certain properties to public domain. For example, the city hall, the park sits on a lot of old residential lots, and we rezoned those, the action rezoned those to public domain. It also cleaned up certain sections in the town code zoning ordinances relative to planned district development and central commercial and other little things. It did not, however, actually change the basic language in the central commercial or the planned district development. That was to come later as a subsequent step to adopting the zoning map. So I'll just finish here. It also has deleted language appearing in other sections of the town code referring to the now defunct CH districts, for example. It set forth a rule whereby discrepancies between the zoning text and the zoning map would be resolved in favor of the map, where now it's these tables which actually sometimes list a parcel in 2 different zones. It then adopted as the town's official zoning map, the map that was included in the general plan as figure land use 2. Again, established a public domain zoning district and rezoned certain properties to the new planned district as I mentioned. The Planning Commission found on January 30th it was consistent, the ordinance was consistent, the zoning map was consistent with the policies and programs in the general plan. And I might remind you that we are required by law, once the general plan is adopted, to bring the zoning ordinance into compliance with the general plan, the blueprint for the future of the town, if you will. Okay, so as the way that ordinances are adopted, it has to go to you first and then go up to the town council. After you make your recommendation on the ordinance, like you did in January, it goes to the council for a first reading and then a second reading that has to be at a regularly scheduled town council meeting, and then if approved in the first reading, the second reading, an ordinance takes effect 30 days after the second reading at a normally scheduled town council hearing. So that occurred. The first public hearing by the town council on ordinance 778 was held on February 13th and was passed. The second reading occurred on March 5th and it was passed. There were people that showed up at the March 5th meeting expressing reservations with certain errors in the narrative section of the housing element, not to my knowledge in the goals, programs, or policies and programs, but in the narrative section. They also pointed out some other inconsistencies in existing zoning ordinance language. But in the second reading, the ordinance was passed, and after the second reading, a petition was circulated in town to repeal the adoption of Ordinance 778. Again, the ordinance would have gone into effect 30 days after the second reading, which was March 5th. So technically the ordinance would have gone into effect on April 5th. 3 days before the ordinance was to take effect, at the next regularly scheduled council meeting, knowing that there was a petition that had been circulated and knowing that there was considerable concern about certain inconsistencies or errors in the narrative section of the housing element, the council actually moved to come back another way with adopting the ordinance, but because the petition was actually rendered to council, I believe the day before or the day of that meeting, the council could not entertain those alternative actions on April 2nd. The petition basically stopped council action to revisit its previous action. And then that petition went to the county for verification of the signatures, and then came back to the town clerk for verification of the legitimacy of the petition. On May 1st, the town clerk found that the petition was inadequately noticed on the petition itself for technical reasons. At that point, the petitioners asked the court to override the town clerk's opinion, and it is still before a judge on a mandate that will be heard sometime between now and September, I believe. On May 7th, at the next regularly scheduled town council meeting, while the petition was in limbo at the courts where it still is, the town council considered the repeal of all or a portion of Ordinance 778, and the council voted 3-2 to start the repeal process for the entirety of Ordinance 778. Okay, so what you're being asked to do tonight, what council directed staff to do, was to bring Ordinance 778 back to you as prescribed in the process of amending an ordinance. And tonight you're being asked to consider an ordinance to repeal 778. The Commission's asked to consider that the council has discussed 778 at 3 council meetings and heard hours of public testimony, both for and against the passage of Ordinance 778. By directing us to start the repeal process with you tonight, the council wants to have a fresh start for the rezoning process to implement the general plan policies, including those found in the housing element. This fresh start would allow the Planning Commission and the Town Council to address the concerns that had previously been raised during the initial approval process. And specifically, the plan is the staff would return to you and the council, as I prescribed, first with you for recommendations, then a first and second reading for the council, and with separate rezoning actions, which would bifurcate what you did in one fell swoop in January into subsections. For example, take rezoning the CH, as highway commercial, to central commercial, put that part of the map in place, and come in with the narrative changes to the CC language of the code. And then secondly, rezone all the lots that are owned by public to PD. So you would change the map, you would change the narrative in the code, you create the the public domain section of the ordinance. And then lastly, rezone the 4 parcels to planned district development, so that last piece of the map would be changed, brought to you with the language changed, added, in this case, to the planned district development. They also directed staff on May 7th to put the town center plan workshops on hold and schedule a general plan forum/workshop to bring the community in for a thorough discussion and vetting of any concerns, because we welcome ways to improve the language pieces and to correct any inconsistencies. And we envision that workshop happening in July. I'd like to back up a moment and say that on May 7th, when the council voted 3-2 to repeal the ordinance, they also asked, as the motion was being made, and on the heels of much public testimony that was supporting the Christ Lutheran Senior Housing Project and its pending funding, to investigate how the council can keep that development of Lutheran Church moving forward while we go through this revisit of 777 in bifurcated sections. So, with that, let me just add that you had in your packet tonight a resolution for denial, for repealing Ordinance 778. And should you decide to go a different direction and recommend to the Town Council to not repeal Ordinance 778, then we would need to make findings at this meeting tonight and incorporate those into a resolution for your approval tonight. And lastly, we are hoping that we can at least appease the council on moving this through you as a body tonight so that they can, in all due diligence, get on with what they want to do. And we envision, again, a special hearing, I don't know if I mentioned this, a special hearing for the town council for the first reading in June. We don't know exactly when yet. And then the second reading has to be at their regularly scheduled council meeting. And if the special meeting were to occur and the first reading successful, then the second reading in all likelihood would go on July 2nd's regular agenda, and then the repeal would go into effect on August 2nd. Now, lastly, the fiscal impacts of this action. It's premature to say how this is going to impact the town financially, but it could. If the actual rezoning subsequent to a repeal didn't go forward fast enough, then we do have some exposure on the senior housing project, and the project manager here for the Resources for Community Development from Berkeley, a nonprofit housing development entity, can explain to you some of the resources that are pending that could be impacted. And then, as we know, there was a grant given to the town for improvements to the parkade area for sidewalks, crosswalks, bike lanes, improving the transit hub there. And that funding required that the town had a certified housing element on January 31st of this year, which we succeeded in accomplishing. And with that, if I've left anything out, Garrett, you want to chime in? The workshop? That, yes, that would be sometime in July, and the date has not been set. And do you want to add to what you see coming out of that workshop? Or?
I think okay. Well, so I think the only thing to add to Jim Moore is that the goal of the workshop really is to provide an opportunity to educate and do some outreach to the public related to the general plan, the elements, including the housing element. So the goal is to have an overview, but also have a dialogue and discussion on possible amendments or revisions to address those possible inconsistencies between the general plan and rezones. And the thought pattern was we'd come up with a list from that meeting, and a future council meeting, the council would decide on what actions it would want to take ultimately. But ultimately, any of amendments or revisions to either general plan, housing element, or the zoning code would have to actually come back at a public hearing to the Planning Commission to start with and go through that process. So other than that, I think Mr. Moore summarized the actions before you quite well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice coming.
So we're going to have some questions for staff, and I think we want to make sure that we up here get our questions, but I'd like to make sure, I'm going to track after about 15 minutes. If we're still going, I'm going to ask that we get to the public, but we do want to get some of our questions asked and answered because my apologies. We're now to the point where we're going to be asking questions of staff. I'm asking the commission or the commission to make sure that we ask the questions we have, but not go on for too long. So after 15 minutes, I'm going to check in because I do want to get to the public portion of this hearing. So bear with us as we ask our questions. So do you want to start?
First question I have, previously we had a housing element that was certified by the state, which is required in California. If there were changes made that would affect our current affordable housing criteria, that we were reducing the density, we were reducing the potential development for affordable housing, how would that process affect our recertification of a housing element? Where does that timeline go? How do we recertify in the process?
We have a responsibility to implement the general plan within a reasonable amount of time. Bringing the zoning map into compliance with the general plan is about a year. We have made certain statements in the housing element which got us the certification. For example, much has been said about density. There's actually been no changes to the zoning ordinance in any way, shape, or form yet with regard to density. But the agreement we reached with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which certifies housing elements as required by law to have one, was that for the two sites, the church site and the Tenalima site that we targeted for senior housing at the church and workforce housing cottages at Tenalima, we agreed that we would, for those two sites, agree to a base density of 20 units on the 2 acres at the church and the 1.24 acre at Tenalima. And that did a couple things for us. It gave us what they call as the default density on enough units to where the town then wouldn't have to go and verify as units were produced, if they were produced, hopefully if they're produced, that they satisfied the very low income range. It gives you a carte blanche, okay, you've reached this threshold of infill, so we're not going to come back at you with, did you get the really low? And of course the good news is with the church project, as we've heard, that's actually targeted, despite not needing to be at extremely low, that is targeted at extremely low. So I guess to answer your question in a timely way, we do have exposure. If we go into this repeal time where we no longer have the zoning map updated per the general plan, we are in a gray area that if we don't come back and adopt the map and the zoning revisions, then we could be decertified.
And the decertification would also cost us the $300,000 parkade grant, or is that?
Yes, and we couldn't then get recertified and get that grant back because we needed to be certified January 31st. The church is a little bit of a different thing, but the monies, and the project manager Alicia Klein can fill us in on this. There's about $700,000 pending on that project, and it has certain road marks they have to meet to be able to get that funding. So if we got decertified all of a sudden and we got recertified magically, then that money could possibly still be around, or they could go after other funds after the fact.
Okay, is that good? Anyone else have questions for staff?
Hi, I have a question about the petition. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? How many people were on there? And then also, what are the legal consequences if it is certified or validated? Okay, hold on. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I was asking for details on the petition. How many people signed the petition, maybe some of the language, and what are the legal ramifications or consequences if that petition or referendum is validated?
Okay, so
Let me ask that.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So while we are asking the Planning Commission to decide on this repeal, and really we want you to decide, setting aside, okay, sorry. How about now? Okay, sorry. All right, so, can you hear me? Okay, so we do want the Planning Commission to really decide on this action this evening, and we don't believe the petition is really germane to your decision. But to answer your question, it had over 1,000 signatures on it. It was not certified due to a default. There is a writ of mandate with the court asking that the court decide or direct the town clerk to certify the petition. If that were to happen, then it would go back to the council and they would have a couple options to consider. Either repeal the ordinance, which actually they're recommending now, or to put it on the ballot.
And can I just correct something I said at the last meeting we had at the regular meeting? I was mistaken when I had said that under the petition, then the repeal would happen immediately. It would have had to come back the same way it's coming back tonight, just for clarification.
Commissioner Lamont?
So you've mentioned a workshop that will help people understand the general plan process better. Do we have to repeal this in order to have a workshop and then amend general plan? And does the understanding of general plan process, is that dependent on repealing this and going back to our old zoning that doesn't keep us in compliance with the state?
No.
So we can still have this workshop and we can still amend our general plan without repealing, correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Actually, technically, you can amend a general plan 4 times a year.
Right, okay. So then I have another question. In piecemealing this rezoning, if we start to take it apart and try to help the Lutheran Church continue on their path, which I like the idea of, but does that put in jeopardy the possibility of rezoning these other sites, then rendering us out of compliance with the state again?
I'm not sure I totally understood what you said. Could you say it once more? I'm sorry.
In taking it apart, when we passed it, we passed this zoning, or we passed the resolution to adopt this zoning for these specific sites, the PDD and
Right.
the PD. In taking them apart and allowing one, but not necessarily ruling on another, does that put the other possibly in jeopardy of ever happening? Because
Now I got it. Thank you.
Okay.
No, I would say after the repeal were to take place, all 3 are in jeopardy until they're repassed.
thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton?
I just had a follow-up question quickly about the referendum process. So you had mentioned that if it is validated, that then the town would be asked to repeal Ordinance 778, or put it to the voters to repeal Ordinance 778. What we're being asked to consider tonight is repealing Ordinance 778. So I'm just a little bit confused about why there's still a writ of mandate in play if we're in process of doing what that writ of mandate is asking us to do right now. What's the difference between the way we're doing it now and what would happen under the writ of mandate process?
So in terms of process, it's the same process. But to answer your question, you would have to ask the petitioners why they filed a writ of mandate.
But if it's repealed under a writ versus repealed not under a writ, the difference being?
I think those are legal issues that I think at this point it's probably not appropriate to comment on. But if the base question is, if we are repealing the ordinance at this time, why was a writ filed? That you would have to ask the petitioners as to why that was the case. I can only hypothesize on why, but it is what it is. So,
But I recall from reviewing the town council meetings, there is a difference. The voluntary repeal would allow changes, pretty much the exact same changes with no delay. A repeal under if the writ was certified and the petition was certified and the town council made a decision at that point, there would be a year delay, even if you were to proceed with repeal or decide to take it on to put it onto the ballot. So there is a delay in terms of those two.
That is correct, but there are little subtleties which each action And I would prefer not to get into that at this planning commission meeting in terms of what everything exactly means. I think from a staff perspective and the council's perspective, it's just one step at a time, and then we'll take action as appropriate depending on what happens at that individual step. The main example being that the direction from the council and staff's recommendation is we see it as a restart. So we're going to go back through the process and do everything. Now, it is true there are things that could happen that will dictate what actions the council could take. But we would prefer to really leave that to the council and just request that the planning commission just consider the item in terms of either either deny or approve the appeal at this point.
So the last question, then I do want to get to the public. We have had a general plan since April of 2012. We have, as a town, amended that plan. As I recall, and I'm looking at the minutes from the town council, they accepted a new housing element in October of 2013. So that's an example of the town general plan and an amendment to the general plan, which leads to changes. So it's not something that we've never done. We've actually already amended our general plan in this town. It's not a static document that doesn't change. And I think it's important to point that out. I do have questions on the proposed ordinance, but I want to get to public comments and then we can get back. Do you have another one question?
Yes.
You didn't get one? All right.
I'll be quick. My question is similar to Roxanne's, and I'm not sure if maybe I didn't quite understand the answer, or maybe my question is a little bit different, but it's regarding the density. Are we beholden to the densities that were described for the particular PDD sites, or can they be amended when the actual application is processed?
We're beholden to allow on those two sites, 2 acres of the church and the 1.24 acre of Tenalima, to allow 20 units an acre, and actually it goes beyond that. It's 20 units an acre. It's a minimum of 16 units on each project site and all housing on each of the lots. That's what we've agreed to do with HCD for those 2 sites, for those potential 62 units.
Okay, thank you.
And that is not a zoning issue that we've brought up. That's actually in the housing element and is not at all related to any of the actions that were identified under Ordinance 778. Is that correct?
Except that, not entirely. The zoning map rezones those 2 sites from their current zoning. On the church property, it's UR7, 1 home per 7 acres. And on Tenalima, it's light commercial. There's 2 parts to implementing the opportunity sites in the general plan. There is amending the map, so you're actually changing the zoning on that lot. And then there's the language in the plan district development to accommodate the state at the default density for those 2 sites.
Okay. One more point, and then we're going to open it up to the public.
I might add, though, we haven't changed the density on those 2 sites or any site in town inadvertently, because we haven't changed that section of the zoning ordinance text. We've never done anything with 20 units an acre yet. It's called for. That would be the next step to adopting the zoning map, is adopting the language amendments in the zoning text for those sections, highway, central commercial, and planned district development.
Just a quick follow-up, because you used the word opportunity sites, and I just want to clarify. My understanding of what the town is required to do is, with these unit zoning issues, is that we are required to create the opportunity for Lutheran Church to give them an opportunity to try and fit a certain number of units into a site. But we are not giving them a guarantee, above all else, that they will be allowed to do that regardless of any other land use regulations. So, for example, there's all kinds of land use regulations around parking, with a PDD, master development plans, specific development plans. In other places, there's setbacks, there's height requirements, there's traffic studies, there's geotechnical studies. There's a lot of other land use regulations, is my understanding, in addition to the number of units. So what we're doing is just giving them the opportunity for the number of units. We're not absolving them of the responsibilities to adhere to all those other land use regulations. Is that correct?
Yes, design review and parking are two excellent examples.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, we have a good crowd. What I'm going to ask, and there is a timer there, and we're going to be using the timer, and I will be enforcing the 3-minute rule. So you can see it in front of you, and I can see it as well. So I'll ask you name, address, and then the clock will start, and we'll take your comments. So,
ready?
You're up and ready to go.
Members of the Planning Commission, town staff, and fellow citizens, residents, and voters of Fairfax. My name is Christopher Lang. I live on Canyon Road, about as far from downtown as you can get. 4 points. First being, the main problem for traffic congestion, I was petitioned by a constituent on my way over here, is the stoplight at Willow and Sir Francis Drake. While staff is here, he respectfully asked me to request that staff work on the timing of that stoplight so there's less traffic congestion at the corner of Willow and Drake. Second point is, I believe the church project is zoned for 14 acres on the 14 units on the 2 acres now, and I think it was mishandled a little bit because a lot of people in the community didn't know that the church wants to put in housing for the old people there, and I think it would be great. The Redwoods, where my mom lives, is much higher density. It's 30 units per acre, and that's a beautiful development that serves a lot of people in the community. So I think the church project, like the town council wants, should be separated out somehow, but making them do it rezoning on their own could be kind of an onerous burden. And to answer Ms. Hamilton's point, Fairfax, one of the reasons I ran for town council was because the town council took 2 years to approve one dwelling unit. And the state and regional guidelines call for Fairfax to facilitate, not to give people an opportunity, but to actually facilitate construction of one dwelling unit per month over a 5-year period. That was the approximate goal, and that was 5, 6, 7 to 9 years ago. So Fairfax has not been in compliance with state housing element guidelines and ABAG guidelines this entire time. And as such, we're not eligible to receive a $300,000 grant to fix up the parkade. So I think it's a good thing to make this happen, but I think at this point, my recommendation is to repeal the ordinance, because the poison pill in this ordinance, in my opinion, as an amateur planner and trained planner, is that removing the highway commercial zoning from the general plan is a mistake, because it makes Fairfax a laughingstock. We can't even put a gas station in where there's already a gas station. Highway commercial has an important function in the town of Fairfax, and it is to allow certain businesses that we don't want proliferating in town or we have some ethical problems with, a place to do business. That's the American way. So I think that's about it. Let's see, highway commercial, oh yeah, and the central commercial zoning already allows to have residential units above it, provided it doesn't interfere with an historic building. However, the town of Fairfax, when I worked with Chamber of Commerce, we found that out. They insist on a parking variance for every single business that opens up, even when that business has no off-street parking. So it's really difficult sometimes to start a business in Fairfax in an existing building, you know, not a high traffic, anything like that, because of the regulations we have about parking. So if there's going to be any residential development in the central commercial zone, the town is going to have to waive the parking requirements. It's that simple. And I'm pretty sure we already allow residential and central commercial. But I do believe it's most important to reinstate the commercial highway zone. My time is up, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay?
Got it. And I
Thank
will
you.
attest that while the town manager is here, that this commission has also asked a number of times about that Willow street light.
Sorry, I didn't see the timer.
Stoplight.
Sorry.
And as you were informed in your prior meeting, there is a study that was
Exactly.
funded and is being run by San Anselmo from Willow on into San.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, Valerie Hood, 79 Dominga, and thanks for a lot of your really good clarifying remarks tonight. The council meeting ran until 2 a.m. I don't know if you know that or watched it, and so things got pretty foggy by the end of the evening, and I'm not even sure I really understood what was happening at the end. But anyway, I noticed that from some of the public comment from last time that you may or may not be aware of, there's a lot of public confusion as to who gets to move into housing that's created in Fairfax. People in Fairfax believe, that I've talked to, that Fairfax residents, current residents, get to move into that housing. I think it's very important that the town help people understand that that is not the case, that you cannot require that people who are current residents get to move in, so that we're not necessarily, creating housing for residents, because people were in tears last time. Oh my God, I need to move into housing. I need housing, and I just wanted to get up and go. This doesn't mean you're going to get it. I mean, it's just. I think it's such a setup for people, and I think that needs to be clarified. I think there's a lack of trust because of the unclearness of the language, the way the whole thing was presented, that it didn't talk about housing density. It was a bunch of numbers. People were really aggravated by that. And I know from talking to people who put the referendums around town, they have been contacted by so many more people going, where do I sign? Where do I sign? Where do I sign? That has to be addressed. There are a lot of people who still want to sign the referendum. They're really upset. This is a cloudy issue. People do not get what's going on. Or maybe they do, but I don't think so. And also, there was one more thing. Oh, no. Sorry. Oh, the last thing, I guess, is that, okay, so there's a current amount of trust by a certain number of people, I'd say, about like where Fairfax might go, and listening to the last comments sounds like people like we would keep it slowed down, but that's not necessarily the case. Planning Commission could change, council could change, and when those things happen and these developments, like Shelley brought up, come before the council or the Planning Commission, we don't know how people are going to decide at that point. There's a huge push. The One Bay Area Plan, the group CALM, all these people who are really pushing for density infill along transportation corridors. A lot of people don't like this idea, okay? So, a lot of money comes in and changes councils, changes planning commissions when there's money to be had. I just want you guys to be really clear in whatever language you adopt. It's so important. Thanks.
Thank you. I know you're all waiting to come up and speak, so anyone next?
So my name's David O'Callahan. I live in 41 Alima. I just want to say that, in my opinion, the information on this whole process here is really not available. I heard stated last time that the information is out there, and I want to say it's just not. And I heard you yourself ask if the impact of this zoning change is really impacting anything, and that's exactly the point. You look at what's put out there, there's a bunch of zoning changes, but that zoning change is what allows this ordinance, I guess, to be implemented, and it's all obfuscated in numbers and things like that. So the information is absolutely not clear. Yes, you may be able to dig, search around and find it, but it certainly was not available when we first started talking about this. And what I heard in the last meeting, the whole process was anything but clean and clear. I mean, I won't, I'll just say that and leave it at that. And I'll state again, the piece that I don't like is the place right at the end of my street, the 10 Olima place. We're talking about 22 units. We talk about parking, things like that. As written in the plan that I was able to find after quite a bit of searching, and I do know how to use the interwebs, is that it's 22 units with 8 parking places. That is just a defective design, and that's just a fact. And I heard you talk about, we're talking about an opportunity, and I heard last time we're passing this plan, but we don't have to implement. I can't help but think of the Patriot Act when we talk about that. Oh, we'll just pass something, we don't have to use it. Well, you know what? It doesn't work that way. If we don't need it, then don't pass it. What I also heard last time was that it's being out of compliance. 50% of California is out of compliance. I heard today the term certification. But what I heard last time was being out of compliance with affordable housing. There was never impact for any of the other places in California that were out of compliance. I don't know about the certification, that wasn't brought up. And the other piece is at the end of Olema, we're talking about workforce housing. I don't really know what that is. It seems to be individual housing, but I don't see that as affordable housing unless you're subsidizing it. And what I heard last meeting is it's not subsidized. So what we're talking about is cheap housing or more housing, not affordable housing. So, thanks.
Thank you. Hi there.
Do I push this?
It's on. You're good.
Okay.
It's already on.
Hi, Bonnie Leonard, 73 Dominga. My question, first of all, I'm very interested in exploring and providing the means for affordable housing in Fairfax. However, I really question what guarantee do we have that these proposed sites will actually be low-cost housing and quote-unquote workforce housing. I mean, there's nothing that I've been able to really read and ascertain that stipulates this, and I'd really like to know what this entails, because if it is, in fact, true affordable housing, what is that? There's many times things come forth that then aren't affordable housing, and then it's just housing. And we have enough housing per se, not affordable. And then the concern arises for me is what about the lack of parking at these proposed sites, which the gentleman before mentioned, but homeowners are literally required to provide 3 off-street parking spaces in our town, individual houses. So why is it that these places that have, such as Tenalima, 22 units with, I think it's 7, maybe 8, I don't know, parking places, and the arguments I've heard are that, well, people that are low cost, quote unquote questionable low cost, or seniors don't drive. Really? I know a lot of seniors that drive, and at Bennett House, many people there are waiting on waiting lists to get parking places there, and they park in the neighborhoods. And I know many people who live up above Klaus are very irritated by the amount of parking that's taken away for their residents. And I just see this snowballing at these various sites. I'm interested in the aspect of affordable housing, but not to compromise our wonderful community and what we have here. And anyway, these are just some of my concerns. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Hi, Nicolo Calderero, 165 Frustuck. And this whole ordinance really began when we realized that back in 2003 we had passed an ordinance to limit formula stores downtown. And yeah, okay, so in 2000...
No, into the microphone.
Okay, so in 2000... in 2000, it was proposed that we try to limit formula stores in Fairfax. It's really the only way of maintaining the character of a town, and in a way it also provides really ad hoc rent control for businesses, because their business rents can't be bid up by big corporations that have lots of stores. And we passed this ordinance to limit to 3 stores that any company could have and open a store in Fairfax. And we made it to cover the whole town, except for a small segment that was supposed to be governed by the state that we could only change by a vote of the entire town. It so happened that somebody, which we don't know who, changed it in writing it up so that it only applied to that small segment and not to the rest of the town. And when we found out about this last year, we were outraged. Frank and I and other people had been involved in this, and we wanted it to be changed so it would cover the whole town. And this came up with the Chevron station. So apparently in the process of going about fixing that problem, this ordinance was created to deal with the town map. Now, one of the problems with low-cost housing, and I've been working on low-cost housing and affordable housing for 40 years, is that And I've been trying to get people to read the Public Policy Institute of California study in 2003 that showed that the housing elements have actually resulted in virtually no low-cost housing and affordable housing being built in California. And why is that? Since 1970. Why is that? It's because nobody can make a profit on low-cost housing, and there's no subsidies. Section 8 is being pulled out. So, and one of the things that we found, there was a great study that was done by Hashimoto and her friends, her associates, back in 1974, and it looked at how in San Francisco they were, from 1950 to 1974, they had been building housing, but they had also been demolishing housing. And in fact, the town hadn't grown very much. They've been demolishing the most affordable housing and building really expensive housing. And so if you look at San Francisco today and the amount of housing it has virtually the same number of units it had back in 1960. And the population is almost the same too. But what's happened is the lowest cost housing has been eliminated. Now, the same thing is happening in
we're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay, same thing is happening in our town. You can say you want low-cost housing, you want affordable housing, but unless you have funding, you're not going to get it. And so the other thing is if you designate sites and you comply with the requirements, those sites can be built instead of for low-cost housing.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys are tough tonight on the timing. I'm going to have to talk faster.
We've never had a crowd like this before. Red light on.
This is on.
There you go.
All right. Norma Fragoso, 74 Myrna Avenue. I've been back and forth with this. I have to say, repeal, don't repeal. But I finally came to some clarity thanks to staff's report tonight. The reality here is that the community, the Planning Commission, and the Town Council took appropriate legal actions, adopting an excellent general plan, housing element, and zoning ordinance. Ordinances and programs that conform to the legally mandated requirements of the state, and I have to add, a beautiful housing element that takes into consideration the character that we love and aim to preserve in Fairfax. The petition has thrown a wrench into the whole process that really is based on typographical errors and in opposition to the thought of affordable housing. And I say the thought of affordable housing because there is no actual housing proposal before anyone today. There's a lot of thinking about it, but no matter what ordinance is in place, they still have to go through the appropriate process, as you all know and have very eloquently stated. The Town Council at the last meeting had a limited understanding because the petition was fresh, there was the writ and the lawsuit and what's going on and the time frame. It all got crazy. There was a lack of information and the time for hindsight and evaluation that we now have had. And again, thank you to staff's report today, who very wisely recommends a measured approach to the bifurcation of a workshop and education process to help people clarify some of these issues. Obviously, there are some issues. Some people signed the petition for the right reasons, but do so in a limited time frame. A limited time frame, as they suggest, have it in July, come back in August, adopt whatever needs to be finalized so that we're in conformance with our general plan. The most important thing is to maintain our certification. Without that, that's where we lose the money. That's where we lose the projects. And I have to say, do not repeal 778. It was a correct action, it was legally mandated, and it is the best thing for the town. The petition disrupts the process, which has made it all crazy, but this town needs to stand by their very appropriate legal action that has the best interests of the community at heart. Go ahead with the workshops, do it in a responsible time frame so we don't lose our certification, because that's the most important thing.
Thank you. All right. 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Good job. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Alexander Binnick, 7 Meadow Way, and I have to say, we don't all agree, obviously. I don't agree with the last speaker that maintaining certification is the most important thing. I think the most important thing is trying for the town, meaning the government of the town and the appointed bodies and the people of the town, to try to talk through, work through, and come to some kind of understanding. We may not end up with consensus, but with something that most people feel they can live with, whether it's some kind of compromise or whatever. I think that's most important, because the quality of life in our town has a lot to do with who we are as a people and what we've developed, and the town government, the elected leaders that we've elected over time, who are working together quite well in general. For myself, I think that it's a healthy process that we're going ahead with repeal, because I think what brought this to the attention of a lot of us who haven't been going to these meetings is that all of a sudden we're hearing about whatever it is, about maybe 150 potential new units. I know they're not here now, but potential. And I don't know how many housing units there are in Fairfax now, but that's a pretty high additional percentage. And so it's waking people up and saying, well, what are the implications in terms of traffic, in terms of parking in particular, and so on? I don't think that's a bad thing. If it slows down the process, I think that's a good thing. And I hope people will be patient while we try to come up with something that, as I say, we can all live with. And to break this, the motion to repeal talks about breaking this into different sections, so that rather than all these things being considered together as rezoning, the Lutheran church property can be addressed separately, the Alima property, and the CCCH issue, and so on. I think these all should be addressable separately. As at the last town council meeting, Council Member Reed mentioned, there's no reason in terms of the extending the ban on formula stores that can't be handled by separate ordinance as well, rather than everything being held hostage to some large kind of thing. And I know my time will run out before I finally got to look at the housing element. Just a couple questions that came up for me. There was something in there about the Fairfax Market area possibly being converted to housing. If that were to happen, where are the seniors who live in Bennett House and who will be living in the Lutheran property going to be shopping? They can't all afford to shop at the Good Earth and so on. They have to go start going out of town, and so on and so on.
Wrap it up, please.
I'm running out of time. Let's see if
we're out of time, so.
Just another thing or two.
Just one.
A closer link between housing and jobs is specified as an objective, and I'm not quite sure how just putting in more housing, there are not a lot of jobs in Fairfax. And some of the things that sound fine in general don't necessarily work in practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Name and address.
Hannah Dress, 28 Porteous. Well, you guys have a tough spot here, and we all do. So, I mean, I definitely am very sympathetic with this idea of that we do need to come together as a town, and I think that we can find a lot of common ground. But it concerns me, you know, the setting that we're in, with a lot of legal actions and with a lot of, you know, with petitions that, you know, include information that I'm not certain is correct, maybe by accident, but whatever. It seems like there's some people who are really upset about signing the petitions. So that's kind of complicating the situation. It complicates what you guys can do. But at the same time, I also know that that you received a letter that questions whether the referendum would be legal. So I think that's something that's important to consider. Basically, I think what's been happening in town is that there's been a very strong natural reaction from people of good feeling against development. And some people feel that way. But I'm here to say that not everybody feels that way. I'm one of the people, and some of us might be a little bit younger, who really does think that transit-oriented development makes a lot of sense. A lot of people, the younger you get, the more likely you are to be using public transportation, bicycles. People are investing in electric bicycles these days to go longer distances. And the more likely you are to not be able to afford a car. And many of our residents of all ages can't afford a car. And having more units in the main corridor would be convenient for people like that. I think the other thing, too, is that, I know people of all income levels who have just struggled desperately to find housing, many of whom have had to leave. And if there were more units, there would be more opportunities for those people to keep their kids in the school and to stay part of the community. Many of them have offered great value to this community, and I don't like seeing them having to leave. And you can say those units are open to everybody, including people coming from Mars, but the reality is that some of the people who live here and who want to live here are going to get some of those units. And there are a ton of people who need housing here. There's a lot of people. There's a growing constituency that's becoming aware of these issues, and that really needs affordable housing. And I think that whatever you do, figure out a way to get affordable housing. And for the church project, we need the church project. Seniors need to stay where they are. They need to have an opportunity to find housing where they are so they can maintain their networks. So many problems for seniors arise from being separated from their networks. So I really think that one of the things is there's a lot of suspicions and things like that have been going around. Oh, sorry. So I do think the general plan and the people who are representing us in the town are a good faith effort, and they've done a good job, and I would retain them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Hoffman, 33 Porteous in Fairfax. And I know you have a big decision to make tonight. One thing I think you should look at is the council voted 3-2 to rescind it. That's one point. The other point is in 12 days, over 1,000 people signed the petition. And that's a very, very short time period. So you have these two, you have the council, plus you have people in the public saying, this should not go forth, and it needs to be redone or changed or whatever. And it just seems that you need to listen to the council and to the people. And I hope that that's what you do tonight.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Christopher McManus. I live at 2575 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And I just wanted to weigh in. I was born here in this county. I graduated from TAM in 1973, and I have been following the affordable housing fight over the years, along with the other fights. And I just want to say, the project is across the street from where I live, and many of my neighbors have bent my ear about their objections. I am for affordable housing, and I am for this project. People have talked about the traffic, the noise, all this other things, but I feel that the need for affordable housing, the need for elder housing, and the need for all affordable housing in this county is paramount. And as a lifelong resident, I would just like to say I've seen a lot of changes in this county, and there will be more changes. This is literally in my backyard. I will hear the skill saws, I will hear the hammers, I will see the construction crews and the trucks coming in and out, and I am for it. I would be a hypocrite if I was against it just because it's across the street. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, Doug Mason of Vaughn Court in Fairfax and Legend. Doug Mason of Vaughn Court in Fairfax and also Sleepy Hollow. To me, the whole issue here is quite simple. The question is, we're kind of at a threshold, and do we want to urbanize Fairfax? That's how I see it. I haven't had a lot of time to study this issue because with work and kids and stuff, but that's how I see this issue. And you know, when I went to school in Oak Manor in the late 70s, and I've observed, you know, from then until now, that the population of Fairfax has increased, yet there's been very little development. And what that tells me is that more people have moved into existing households as it is. It's evident from all, you can see it from the population here. And so I ask you is, if that is your intent, if that is your long-term goal to see the urbanization of Fairfax, then don't, you know, go with the ordinance. But I'm for repealing the ordinance. And I mean, the question is, the next step, are we going to put parking meters downtown? Are we going to build, you know, have decals for parking? Because the parking is going to be an issue. And then we talk about, what if San Rafael and San Anselmo urbanize? There's no jobs here. So I see it as an urbanization that's going to really have a dire consequences. So I hope you go and do repeal the ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi there.
Good evening. My name is Amy Gossman. I live on 243 Oak Manor Drive here in Fairfax. I just wanted to let you know I had an unusual experience coming out of the Good Earth where I was asked to sign a petition against the zoning changing for 74 units of housing that was going to be built across the road from Drake High School. And I said, I hadn't heard about that. And he said, oh yes, it's going to have very small amount of low-income housing. I said, how much? And he said, I think about 10%. And I said, oh, I hadn't heard that. That doesn't sound like a very good place to put 74 units. And okay. And I said, I hadn't heard about these 74 units, and that doesn't sound like a good place to put them across the road from Drake. On Sir Francis Drake, because it's such a terribly busy road. And so I signed the petition and went home and said, I haven't heard about this. And this is very awkward for me because I'm on the Council of Christ Lutheran Church, and I signed the petition basically that I thought was for something else that was actually trying to get in the way of what we were doing. So I just want to let you know that I was very confused by the petition, as was the person that was telling me about it. Unfortunately, I signed it. I won't be doing that again before I read entirely the petition in the future. I just want to speak to whether you repeal or don't repeal the ordinance. I have no clue which is the best way for you people to proceed. However, we would love to fulfill our goal of sharing our property. We already share it very happily with Cascade Canyon School. We realize we have a great blessing in that piece of land, and we would love to share it with some more people. I don't know how the best way is for that to happen, because I'm so confused by this political process, because I don't think it's democratic. I think it's a political process, and I really pity the process that you're having to go through, and I just wanted to let you know that that's our goal, is to share the land and to share it with people, that they can enjoy it every day the way that we do enjoy it for our Sundays. And we've been working on this for years, and we would love to see it to come to fruition. And whichever way you find to make that happen, we would love your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alicia Klein, and I live in Berkeley. I work for Resources for Community Development, which is a nonprofit affordable housing developer. And we were selected by Christ Lutheran Church a couple of years ago because of their vision to share their land with in addition to their own worship and the school, Cascade Canyon, that operates there, to add housing for seniors who are low income and have been priced out of the area. And we're helping them to make that dream come true. Where are we in the process? Very beginning of that process. We haven't even selected an architect. So we know that we have a long road ahead of us that will involve coming back to your commission and for approvals. And we're here tonight just to explain a little bit about how the zoning decisions are potentially affecting the future creation of affordable housing at the Lutheran Church site. And we did part of our early activities in getting started is to start applying for funding. And we've been very happily received a commitment from the Marin County of some federal funding. Right now, they just committed up to $500,000, and the Marin Community Foundation has also committed some pre-development grant financing. Some of the federal funding that has been committed by the county comes with very strict timelines. And once they make that commitment, you only have so long before you need to accumulate all of your financing, and part of that financing requires the zoning to be in place. So that's where we come back to the topic tonight. Without the rezoning, there is no affordable housing development on the site. As was stated, the current zoning is 1 home per 7 acres. That's not feasible. So if it is repealed, it doesn't necessarily kill the project or kill the financing, but it makes the timeline very tight and potentially risky, because it would need to then get rezoned again quickly enough, like by the end of the year or beginning of next year, to for the funding that has been committed by the county to stay available. So I wanted to provide that background. Just a couple of the questions that were asked earlier of how do we know it's affordable? I can't speak to the zoning side of that, but just know that the selection process that Christ Lutheran went through to find a development partner they were only looking at affordable housing developers. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks.
John Sargent, 55 Madrone Road. You know, the town council was very clear that they wanted to start over right from the beginning in order to have full public participation in this process. I'm hearing from some of the people on the Planning Commission, well, let's just go ahead and with certain parts of it and then not rescind the ordinance. That certainly wasn't the intent of the town council. Larry Bragman on the council did mention that he favored some sort of development at the church, but he didn't specify what kind, and he did vote no. He did vote to rescind the ordinance. You know, among the people that are going to attend these workshops, again, you're going to get some politically active people that very probably will not represent truly the citizens of Fairfax. I mean, that the referendum shows that. So, you know. Then I also hear about you're very concerned about not getting that A-bag money, and you know, I've heard people say that's the most important thing. We've got to get that A-bag money. That $300,000 is just chump change, and it's certainly not ruining it's not worth ruining this town. In addition, I understand that ABAG wants another 61 units on top of the 172 between 2015 and 2022. This doesn't end, you know, when you start taking that money. I think I understand people who want affordable housing. I'm in favor of affordable housing, but not in Fairfax. This town is built out, and if people want to live in Marin County, then they can live somewhere else other than Fairfax. I would urge you to rescind that ordinance and not proceed with anything more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Morgan Hall. I live at 10 Walsh Lane. And I'd just like to say that the general plan is a very fine, amazing document. It's the envy of any other community in this county, as far as I'm concerned. And as we all know, is the result of 14 years of work by probably the finest minds here in Fairfax. Many of you are in this room and up on the dais. So I'm not sure what could be accomplished by going back and tweaking it more. I think it's a pretty good document as it is. And by the way, all of that 14 years was in open session, so if anybody thinks they were not informed, they just weren't there. The thing that people don't understand too is beyond the general plan, there's a whole part of the municipal code that covers zoning. So if somebody wants to put in a planned development unit, a bunch of units, they've got to go through this elaborate, hard, arduous process. That's the time for the people to rise up, not to try to shoot down this overall general document. It'd be like, the Constitution passed the 18th Amendment for prohibition, and I don't know, 15 years later they decided to repeal it. So do you go after the amendment itself, or when they go to appeal it? I don't quite get it. Anyway, the general plan is being held hostage, but I think the Planning Commission should look to what they're really being asked to do and what their area of purview is. The municipal code says that the powers and duties of the Planning Commission shall perform all of the duties and obligations required of it by the laws of the state of California and the provision of this code, and shall perform other duties as may be required by the town council. The housing element, part of the general plan, is required by law to be reviewed by the state, and if it doesn't pass that review, the housing element becomes decertified, and that may mean that this is a political matter. You're not to concern yourself with losing $300,000 of money for the parkade, or losing $700,000 and 40 units at the Lutheran Church. That's not your decision. That's political. So I urge you to just back up the general plan, not to repeal Ordinance 778.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, Mimi Newton, 139 Mono. I support repealing the ordinance and then moving forward on a very fast time frame with a workshop to discuss and explain to the community what you want to do next. And I would imagine that you want to start bringing forward provisions to conform the general plan and the zoning ordinances, and I recommend that you do it one piece at a time, and that you have a workshop on your highest priority first, and then move forward piecemeal like that as you go forward. And I think, the community has an obligation to be engaged. If the only people who show up are the ones that are paying attention, then shame on everybody who doesn't come to the workshops. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Wendy Callens. I'm with Coalition for a Livable Marin, and I live at 24 Cortez Avenue in Forest Knolls. I work in Fairfax. Fairfax is my town as far as I'm concerned. This is where I come to shop, this is where I come to work, and this is where I spend a lot of my time. I think the most important thing that really needs, when people say, what's the most important thing? And I think it is process. There was an excellent process that created this general plan and created this housing element that led to this ordinance for zoning. Your job is planning. Your job is not politics. Lucky for you, that's the job of the town council. You need to make good planning decisions. And I don't think that Fairfax is against affordable housing. I think Fairfax is just against housing. And the thing is, if you want affordable housing, well, then that's housing. And if you want to build affordable housing, then, people ask, how can you guarantee it? Well, you guarantee it by giving enough density in there, not urbanized density, Fairfax pushed back against urbanized density. They said, we want something in character with our town. You created a plan that I think is commendable, that I think the other towns in Marin really need to look at, because other towns, like Corte Madera, did not create a good housing element, and that's why they got WinCup. You've created something that really took into account the unique character of Fairfax, and you want to serve the unique characters of Fairfax. There are compelling reasons not to rescind this ordinance. The danger of losing the church project, which is very important to the town, of being out of compliance with your general plan and your housing element, and the possibility of legal action being taken against you if that happens. Again, this is a planning decision that you're making tonight. And I do think that we need to slow down. I think that people need to be informed. You don't have to rescind this ordinance in order to do that. This ordinance can be rescinded at any time. It is only because there's a referendum putting a gun to your head right now that everything is being rushed. And after 16 years of developing a plan, to rush to pull back on it seems a bit disingenuous. I think that you need to take your time in going through this process and getting people informed, because a lot of people who signed that petition did not know what they were signing. And that's something that disturbs me greatly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi there.
Hi, I'm Jennifer
You can lift it
Hammond, 9 Iron Springs Road. Can you hear me? So I just have copies of a letter that I emailed earlier. I just wanted to provide copies. Should I just do
Do we want to reset the clock? Okay, the time will start now.
Okay. I just want to make clear that I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not for any organization or affiliation. I was a paralegal for 20 years, so I am looking at this matter from a legal, from a legal perspective. And what this letter, says and the attachments to it, basically, this isn't the forum to have these discussions that we're having right now on people's concerns about whether this is, we should have this zoning ordinance or affordable housing. It's just not the proper step in the process. The housing element was passed in October of 2013. That's where the policy was set for the zoning map. This zoning ordinance just mirrors the policy that was already adopted by the town council. So the proper process, the most efficient process and probably the least expensive process would be to have these workshops that staff has proposed, give the residents of Fairfax another chance to give feedback and have the conversation. And if it's decided that there should be changes to the general plan where the policy is set, to the housing element where the policy is set, it can be done at that juncture. And if needed, then a new ordinance, zoning ordinance, revised zoning ordinance can be proposed and put into place. I think that's the proper process. And I think I did a lot of legal research on this, and this is the conclusion that I came to. So anyway, I know this is a lot of information to sift through, and I appreciate all your time and energy on this matter. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, I'm David Kroll of 30 Claus Circle. And I think, as was said before, the town council has asked you to work on repealing the ordinance, and I believe that the staff has recommended that you follow that process, and I agree with that. I would like to make another point in terms of traffic, that Sir Francis Drake Boulevard is rated F by the State Highway Commission, Any further development only enhances that rating. You can't go any lower than F. I live right around the corner from Bennett House, and if you think that seniors and people who live in low-income housing don't use cars, I think I'd have to disabuse you of that notion. There's tons of traffic that comes from Bennett House. And if you know anything about people who live in the Canal District, which is the low-income housing area of San Rafael, there are tons of cars and trucks. People have to get to work. Sir Francis Drake is a mass transit corridor, but it's a mass transit corridor that is stuck. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else wanting to speak now? Go ahead, stand up. I want to make sure we get everybody that hasn't spoken. We got folks getting up. Hi there.
Hi, Mila Ruan, 20 Live. I just want to say that I really learned a lot today, and I came here to learn. And one thing I can give is my experience, because I was involved with urbanization of Fairfax, I think in the 80s, when everybody was saying if we have traffic lights, then Fairfax will no longer exist. We just cannot change. And so that there's always been this talk about urbanization and we can't have more of this, more of that. And as a practical person, I just want you to look at it in a measured way, practical way, and a way to get affordable housing. And I do believe there is such a thing as affordable housing because it depends on who is actually creating affordable housing. And what I've learned today is that there are a lot of rules and regulations and zoning that will be looked at a future time. So I don't see the need for repealing right now unless I didn't understand what's happening, that you could still look at it in a measured way without repealing and making us look. What I see one thing about this town is we say one thing and then we change it, and it gets to be like dysfunctional Fairfax all over. We have a reputation sometimes of being that way. So if we do it in an intelligent, measured way, I think that's all I can ask for. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Good evening, Commission members. My name is Kiki Laporta. I live at 25 Glen Drive in the house that my family purchased in 1966. When we first moved to Glen Drive, we were the next to the last house on the street, on the left-hand side before the creek, before the school. Now we have Canyon Manor directly across the street on Glen Drive. That, when it was built, was less expensive than the detached houses that the rest of us lived in. We have Shemran Court behind me. And directly across the street from me, there are several houses that were built as affordable housing. In the time that my family has lived on this street, we have seen families across the street raise their children go off, they move, and other families move in. There's a beautiful young couple with young children who live across the street from me. I really enjoy seeing them. They're not the same people who were there before. My house, which used to have 5 people living in it, now has 2. We have extra bedrooms, we have extra parking places that we don't need. This is what happens to towns and places where people live and grow and have their families. I'd like to endorse the comments that have come tonight related to the genius and the beauty and the heart of our general plan. And I'd like to endorse especially the spirit of the Lutheran Church and the folks there who have decided that it is their mission to share the good grace that they have been granted, their space and their resources, to make that available to others in this grand flow of ebb and flow of life, and Fairfax is not an island. We need to really understand that we all need to be driving less. It took me almost 40 minutes to get from my house to Civic Center this morning for an 8 o'clock meeting for which I was late. It's not because of affordable housing, and it's not just because of people who are living on Glen Drive. People need to come from West Marin. We all need to be looking at what we're doing to our planet. And also, I think we need to grasp and hold on to the spirit of this town that has heart, that is inclusive, that doesn't say, I love affordable housing as long as it's not in Fairfax. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Jane Richardson Mack. I live at 49 Madrone Road. I've lived there since 1980. I am a senior. I couldn't possibly survive if I didn't have a car. I have to drive my car for work. I can't walk to Good Earth to get groceries and carry them home. It's just not feasible. I don't intend to ever move if I can help it. As long as I can work, I can afford to live there. I think you should do as the town council asked and as a great many members of the community asked, and clear the air and start over. I don't know how all this happened, but it seems like there are too many things lumped into one big pill to swallow. Not that each and every one of them, I agree, should be dealt with separately. It would be wonderful to have the workshops first so it would be clear to the community what it is exactly they're being asked to approve or disapprove. When you say affordable housing, I've never heard a figure mentioned. What does that mean? Does that mean an income of under $20,000 a year, under $10,000 a year, under $50,000 a year? Who's going to decide that, and how is that all figured out? I support it, but I think things should be done in a more open way. I have an uncomfortable feeling, it happened with the Chevron thing, that it's starting to feel like Fairfax is for sale, that we're so desperate for money that as soon as somebody waves a big check, we just rush to go ahead and say, okay, and then worry about the rest of it afterwards. And by that time, the public finds out and they're not happy. So if we could turn it around and make things more clear. I may be remiss. I mean, I don't know exactly how you go about letting the whole town know. I know it's posted. Little things are posted in front of the police station and the town hall. Maybe there's a better way to let the public know what's going on, but things seem to have gotten rushed, and it feels, again, like it's for sale and some of it's secret, or things are just, it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel true to the spirit of our town. So I ask you to do that. Listen to the community, listen to the town council, and let's get some fresh air. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi there.
Good evening, Commissioners. Frank Ager, 13 Meadow Way. I've been gone most of the month of May, so I've kind of missed a lot of the dialogue that's taken place. In 1964, I was appointed to the Fairfax Park and Recreation Commission, and in 1966 elected to the Town Council. And I served there for 10 four-year terms until December of 2005. I served 7 terms as mayor. I was the first Prop 20 Coastal Commissioner appointed in 1972. Served 9 years there. Worked directly with the State Attorney General's Office, the Environmental Unit, on land use and zoning issues. During my years in the Town Council, there were 4 specific issues, land use zoning issues, that I championed, that the majority of the Town Council at the time was very skeptical about. The town attorney told me I was wrong, I didn't know what I was talking about, objected to the causes I was championing. All 4 ended up in court. All 4 ended up at appellate court. 2 of the 4 ended up at the Supreme Court. All 4 are now case precedent law, taking a position that supported the positions that I took and the town of Fairfax and the people of Fairfax took. So Fairfax is aware of zoning, aware of land use issues, and we've been really active in that field for a long time. One of the cases was Piper Court Apartments. I had authored a policy for the state that banned the conversion of apartments to condominiums to protect rental housing. And that was a temporary policy that the Coastal Commission held for about 6 years. I brought that ordinance to Fairfax, and Fairfax Council did adopt it. That's why there is no condo conversions allowed in Fairfax. We've protected our rental housing in this community, and it's been a great asset for our community. The town was sued, and I was personally sued. You know, the process server knocked on my door, and the developer who was proposing the application wanted well over $1 million from me personally for the loss of his value of the ordinance that I championed. That's one of the cases that went up on appeal, and it was upheld, precedent-setting. A general law city has a right to ban condo conversions of apartments to protect rental housing. You know, one of the problems with the zoning ordinance is it put the cart before the horse. The planned district development zone works. The existing planned development zone works. The 70 unit. Wrap it up. Okay, the 70 unit Bennett House project was approved under the PDD zoning. The Lutheran Church project is not being held hostage at all. They can apply today, they could apply yesterday, they can apply anytime under the PDD zoning and go through their approvals.
Mr. Ager.
I urge you to rescind the ordinance tonight to save the grief of this community and be able to fresh start and allow the town council a fresh start on the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wait, I know you've already, Ms. Veger, I know you've spoken. I want to make sure that everybody is.
I was just going to say,
no.
If no one else.
Let me make sure that I get everybody who hasn't spoken. I'd like you to come up. Really, everybody a chance. Thank you.
Joe DiScala, Sleepy Hollow. Before I leave, I want to give you a study to look at, just a summary of a study about air pollution and about a development that's going on in Sleepy Hollow. In any event, I want to talk about the thinking process here. I attended the Middle Hall, the thing at Hall Middle School. There are 600 people there saying, we don't want what happened in Corte Madera. Now we have the Corte Madera City Council hiding. So they had staff reports, they said, oh, if we had only known the way the communities around us would have reacted, we wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have done this. Oh, we had this study here and the study there, and it's all a cover story. They didn't want people to know. Now, if you think about this, would you put your name, address, and phone number on these buildings and all this development, and maybe the manager's office and the planning director's phone number and everything, and say, you know what, 5 years from now, if you got a problem, go find the guy. Because the Corte Madera Council is going to be gone. They're all crying, they're hiding right now. You couldn't get them on the phone to save your life. And people are up in arms in Ross and Kentfield and all the surrounding areas. Now, what I'm saying is that the underpinnings of our Constitution is notice and opportunity to be heard. Whether or not this is a good deal is a separate issue. When I drive out of the Hollow, I can turn right and sit in the traffic and try to go to Good Earth. Or the point will become, well, I can't do it and you got to go left. Be that as it may, is that a full, robust debate should take in all the surrounding communities. You know, staff this and staff that. The council and the people that make decisions are not here for staff. They're here to represent the interests of the voters and the taxpayers. So in connection with what you do, ask yourself, would I put my name on these buildings, my name, address, and phone number, and the city managers and the planning directors, so that when people are sitting in traffic and all of these subordinate issues occur, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to be gone. Council's going to be gone, planners are going to be retired, and so forth. So with regard, my issue is with process. and to make it robust, wide open, uninhibited. Some of you started out your conversation, well, I don't quite understand this, and I don't quite understand that, and, you know, are we doing this and we doing that? Well, you can imagine the way the public is. So I mean, you know, so it's a matter of process, being clear, understanding. You know, in the old days, there would be copies of packets. Now it's, oh, we can only make one packet. You got to go to the internet and do it. So, you know, that's
Time's
my
up.
point. Am I stopped?
Yeah, 2
Okay.
minutes.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And I just want to leave this with
And do you want to give it to, we'll take, here, hold on 1 second. I'll give you, no, you can pass those out and I'll have the next person wait so she's not interrupted.
Make sure.
Just give it to the, thanks.
Hi.
All right, hi there.
Hi, my name is Liesl. I live at 22 Pacheco Avenue, and I'm not a politician. I haven't been extremely politically involved. This has made me become more politically involved and more interested in these issues. I want to just make sure that we know that we're not Ross, Kentfield, and San Anselmo. We're Fairfax, and we're kind of special, and we should be looking at things. We are in relationship to the rest of our region, but we're also special and we're different, and we don't need to be exactly like those towns and have those towns determine our policy for us. I also just wanted to note that a lot of people signed that petition that didn't know what they were signing and felt that they were misled, including one of my family members who was on the waiting list for just about every affordable housing complex in Marin and who practically broke into tears when he realized what he had signed because he thought he was protecting me. He was told that the downtown was going to be completely redeveloped by these wealthy developers who are going to reroute traffic around my house and destroy my quality of living. I feel really sad about that, and I would like there to be a lot more conversation about, you know, what exactly we're proposing. And I'm fine with there being more conversation, but I just don't want it to be that kind of misinformation that I heard several people who signed the petition felt that they got. I think that I also want us to keep in mind that we're a town that is made up of neighbors that are going to run into each other and work with each other about all kinds of different issues. There's a lot of people who want the referendum that I really like, and I think they're some of the coolest people I've met. So I want us to keep in mind that we have many things in common, as well as the fact that we may disagree about this issue. We're all well-meaning. We all want to do what's best for Fairfax, and we have differing opinions about what that might be. And therefore, I hope that we're going to keep in mind that there aren't necessarily these evil demons doing all these bad things to each other. We are having a difference of opinion that I hope we will work out through public conversation. And I think the other thing that I just want to say is, you know, I live somewhere where parking's really at a premium, and I've lived for years in a place where parking's really at a premium. I still put social justice above my inconvenience. I have one car between two people, and we don't even use it most of the time, and we try to park it out, you know, somewhere where it's out of the way. I think it's possible for other people to do that, and I think it's important for us all to look at our contribution to traffic. And so I hope we're all going to keep working together and thinking about a way that we can make this town affordable for some people to stay here, and also keep the quality of living that we have and that we love so much. And I think there might be strategies for doing that. So that's it.
Thank you. Hi there.
Hello, I'm Jessica Green from 154 Ridgeway, and I think, you know, you have to realize that a lot of people that were into rescinding this rezoning are not against this you know, low-cost housing. You know, some of these are really good projects, but we wanted to be right, the zoning for everything, and there was a lot of things rezoned, and maybe there's some of the things we can do without, like the second stories on the downtown. And I think that there's, you know, since it's maybe a bill going up to change the way ABAG is requiring us to be dense, but that doesn't mean we don't want low-cost housing just because we don't want to pass this whole thing, which comes in a big package in which there's a lot of mistakes. And I think that we also have to think about the water. We may not have enough water. Looks like water is down coming, you know, our way. And it doesn't mean I don't think, I think we should have this, Lutheran church thing. I mean, but I think it's not all finished yet. That there've been some things to think about with this, and even though some people say they've been working on it for all these years, somehow it hasn't come to public opinion in recent years, and yet all these changes have been made. So that's my opinion, is that we should wait and try to look at all this zoning and see, and still maybe do the Lutheran church, and then also I think our town has a lot of low-cost housing compared to most of the towns in Marin. I think we probably have more of it than most of the towns, and that's something also to consider. But like I'm not saying we shouldn't have some more low-cost housing, but because there were so many different things that got rezoned, and I just think that we need more time to do it right, because it's a big decision. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's another one. All right. Please, if you would like to speak and you haven't spoken, be ready.
Hi.
Thanks.
My name is Bill Carey. I live at 220 Marinda. I've lived in Fairfax since 1975. I've seen a lot of different developments go in. I remember when Bennett House went in, and that's 80 units, and I think we're talking about 127 additional units. I'm not sure. I've heard different numbers, so I'm unclear. But I thought everyone said that was going to be the end of the world. That's 80 units. That's at least half of what is being proposed now. And I didn't see a whole lot of traffic change. I didn't see very much change with that at all. And I hear words like urbanization of Fairfax. All these, big grandiose concepts, but I think it's being blown out of proportion. And I think a lot of people really don't understand the general plan and understand how it works and the different areas where you can step in and put your input or give your input. So, just one other little fact. A lot of my neighbors supported Terrapin Station when that was supposed to go in the old Good Earth. And they were figuring 300 to 400 cars a night, 6 nights a week. And they were supporting that. And I live right next to that. I live right next to Bennett House. And I was thinking, well, I know where they're going to be parking and where they're going to be coming out at 2 in the morning every morning. But I didn't hear a big uproar about that. Oh, I missed that one. Sorry. I was away for that one. But anyway, I think there's a way to address the parking and different issues. And again, I guess it's a matter of scale and what 126 units really means. Or 172, I'm not sure what it is. So, but hopefully you or the commission can bring more clarity on those kind of issues and how you would be able to address parking and keep this moving forward instead of rescinding it now. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else who hasn't spoken? I think we have to be very careful, and I would actually appreciate input from staff about how we do this at town council. Do people come back up, or is it kind of once and from the town manager? We want to. I think we've gone 2 hours, so I want to.
It's really
Everybody's gone
up
once.
to the planning commission how you would like to handle it. But yes, it gets a little awkward if all of a sudden everyone spoke again. Then we'd be here till midnight.
Right. So, is there anyone here who hasn't spoken that would like to speak? I really, really, really want to make sure we get that. Okay. Can I see a show of hands who would get up again to speak again? I'm not picking or choosing, I'm just seeing this. So I'm seeing 10 or 15, so that's another half hour plus. And I think we've heard a lot. I think we are really trying to get a sense. I think all of us on the commission were advised to review, and actually I spent all of last night until 1:30 watching the May 7th. I tried to do it real time just so I could experience it like everyone else. But I want to honor that everyone has come to this Planning Commission meeting, and I want to make sure everybody's given their input, and I do appreciate that. But at this point, I'm not seeing any hands to come speak for the first time. And so that we're able to move forward with this process, I think I'd like to close public comment, bring it back to the commission. We're going to have discussion. I want to make sure that everybody can hear us, so just raise your hand. If you can't hear, we'll pull the mic closer. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, because we've never had very unusual to have a crowd this large, describe what we do at the Planning Commission and why. Some of the questions that you heard from us earlier were being asked. Part of it is to educate ourselves as well as you. We've spent a great deal of time working on this in the minutiae, in the trenches, to make sure that we understood it. And I think we've had, and I don't know as a group how many meetings we had, but it was, over the time of the general plan, dozens of meetings covering different topics in different parts of the general plan. All of those were publicly noticed. All of those were open for public input. As we moved into the adoption of the general plan, there were a number of meetings. And I do think that the point that I made at the beginning is, with the housing element, the original housing element submitted in the general plan was not approved and accepted by the state. The town council, the planning commission, the public, I believe there was at least one joint meeting that I recall, went through a process related to the housing element. That was unanimously forwarded by the planning commission, unanimously approved by the town council in October of 2013. I think this is important background for all of you to understand. Almost every point that was made tonight regarding density, regarding development, regarding traffic, part of the 2013 housing element was a traffic study evaluating 174 units and the traffic impact of that, certified unanimously by the town council. Part of that process included as we went through that process, there were discussions around the different densities, and all of these items that were brought up tonight are part of the housing element. None, except for the zoning map, there's no mention of density. There's no change or anything with respect to the PDD zone other than the lots and the table that's presented in the chart. There's nothing about how PDD is managed or anything. So again, that's some of the discussion that we've had, is that the wording, while this was a zoning plan that came forward as an ordinance, it was essentially implementing the housing element that unanimously passed town council, well, planning commission and town council, has a traffic study that's been certified by the town council. So the concerns about traffic, the concerns about development, density, all of those things were addressed at that time. It's perfectly, and that's part of this process, is to bring it up again and revisit it. But what's important for everyone to understand is those are all parts of the housing element, and the discussion around that I've heard tonight would really be talking about how the housing element, how those elements within the housing element would be modified. Because that's the meat of what I was hearing tonight. The zoning itself simply reflected what was, the zoning ordinance, which is being proposed for repeal, was simply reflecting what was in that housing element and the general plan. So, and I do want to keep asking questions and keep making sure that when we're clarifying things, it's not just for our benefit, it's for your benefit because you're here. I think it's been the last year, all of our planning commission meetings have also been televised. And so you can watch them later on YouTube. And having watched them, it actually works. It's good coverage. You hear everybody. You can see what people are saying. It's actually a good service that's provided by the town. In terms of process, that's really part of this process, is public notice, public hearings, public input. And I think all along the way those things have been happening, and and we appreciate that we get crowds like this once in a while to continue that dialogue. So at this point, I do want to open it up to the commission to have discussion, ask additional questions of staff, get clarification. Anybody want to go first?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, wow, you know. It's incredible to get so much feedback and involvement from the community. I think we are very blessed, and it's a pretty big honor to serve here. I think everybody's opinion matters, but what I'm seeing right now is a lot of emotion over a topic that was brought up almost, I don't want to say at the last hour, but 3 days, the petition was signed 3 days before the meeting, and it seems that a lot of the responses or a lot of the feedback we're getting are a reaction versus a response, that maybe there's a lot of misinformation out there and that people are making decisions based on that. The items that are covered in the general plan are, complicated, loaded items, and the process is complicated, and how things are approved and move forward is very complicated. I would like to commend and applaud the staff for getting us as far as we have gotten. It's quite amazing. I worked with regulatory agencies for 15 years. It's almost a miracle, and I really appreciate that. And I think Ordinance 778 was a mechanism that was put into place to make sure that the general plan could move forward. The issue plan is a big body of work, and I think it is fair to revisit the housing element. I think transparency can be gained. I think awareness, education through workshops. I don't think moving forward with this ordinance is going to compromise that. Obviously, a lot of people haven't read the general plan. It's been available. It's a big document, and this kind of reminds me of the elephant in the room, that you are in with the elephant in the room, and you're really only looking at a small part of the elephant and not really the whole body of work. And maybe there is a problem with that small part, but I don't think it's worth sacrificing or compromising all this work that's gone into the general plan because something is not quite right or needs to be vetted through. So I see this, I understand the emotion, I understand maybe resistance to change. Change is hard. However, I think change can be good if it's done with sensitivity, intelligence, and good design. I think about what the residents 100 years ago would think about Fairfax now. I'm sure they never anticipated this kind of change. But if it's done with sensitivity and intelligence, I think that's the key, and I think we've got a really great group of people working toward that end. And I think you would see that if you come to the workshops. So again, I think this is just, for me, this is a mechanism that we need, or maybe if you want to call it a safety valve, that is part of the design that will ensure that things don't get so screwed up that you can't change them or go back. The fact that we have 4 opportunities to fix things is pretty amazing, I think. 4 opportunities in 1 year, that's a lot. When you consider how long things, policy takes to get approved. So I don't think this is going to lock anybody out from being heard or from affecting change in a positive way. And I welcome everybody to be part of that so that you can be proud of what we have here in Fairfax. So I really see this as, just following procedure to make sure that we can move forward with all the work and intelligence
and thoughtfulness that has gone into the general plan. And, you know, I'm still learning, but what I've discovered is that we have a really great group of people that really are serving your best interests. And, you know, I guess I invite you all to be part of that process as we move forward. But anyway, I see this as a technicality. Something that has to keep moving forward in order for us to, you know, correct things and maybe be thoughtful about how we go about it instead of reacting emotionally to one part of it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks. Can I get someone to turn that? Yeah, thank you very much. And I will ask, we listened and we didn't make comments during presentations, and I think we expect the same of the public as we're making our comments. So, thanks.
I appreciate everybody coming here tonight, and I applaud you all for taking interest in your town and coming here to voice your opinions, whatever side of the issue you're on. I'm sure a lot of you left work early to come here. You may have missed dinner to come here. You may have had to get a sitter or bring your dog with, but you're here because you care about your community, and we all care about our community as well. A lot of what I heard, I'm an urban planning professor, actually, and I'm already pulling out lectures that I think we can have to help educate the process, but I think a lot of what I heard are things that can be resolved. I think a lot of what I heard are nuances and sometimes misinformation or not enough information, or ways that we as a town and as a planning commission and the staff can better provide information. I heard a lot of that tonight. We want access to information. We want it to be more user-friendly. We want to get it out in a format that we can understand. I have my planning students that can't understand planning documents when we start, so I understand that that's a really frustrating process. We're a local level of government, and America is meant that way because people want to have control at the local level. We want Fairfax to decide our decisions. We don't want Sacramento deciding it. We don't want Washington deciding it. And so those land use controls are made here at the local level through town council. Getting your opinion in there matters. Yet there are issues that are a little more regional in nature, and because of that, our state does mandate that all communities in California, every town, every city has to have affordable housing. What is affordable housing? Really, for Marin County, it's about $80,000 for a family of 4. So we're not even talking very low income or moderate income housing. So $80,000 in another state, you know what that can buy you. So, you know, there's this whole continuum of what's considered affordable housing, and HUD, actually, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, sets those guidelines. So there's this issue of jobs housing balance. There's this issue of we want people to be able to live in a community where they work, and by not doing that, we do actually increase traffic congestion if people have to come on Sir Francis Drake to get to our town. I did hear people concerned about this issue of, well, how do we guarantee who lives where? We don't. We have fair housing laws. So we can't discriminate that somebody in another town who wants to move here when we build new housing is precluded. A lot of us came from somewhere else, and others of us were born in Fairfax and have been able to enjoy this community for a long time. But I think some of these issues and some of the things that were brought up can be worked on in a workshop, and I think some of what I've been hearing in terms of sentiments of why there's particular developments or shifting of zonings, what are the real concerns around it? Are they traffic congestion? Are they air quality? Are there noise issues? And really getting at some of those issues helps us in determining, and at the town council level, what policies we can use to address it. And so I think as we sort of peel back and have more candid workshops to get at some of those issues, that can help in formulating the policies, and then that can help lead to this document. As we mentioned, the general plan, every community in California is supposed to have a general plan. The state requires 7 particular elements to go in there. The housing element's the only one that is required to be certified by the state. But this can be changed 4 times a year. Big cities, San Francisco's, Los Angeles, Oakland's, those are the types that make revisions all the time. And we have that power at our local level. So if we want to make those changes, we can have those. So again, that's part of the process of how we can go about advocating for change and getting change in. It's a living document. It reflects the vision of our community, we want it to be a proactive document as opposed to a reactive document. We'd like to have that vision of what our community looks like that represents our community now and how we see it in the future. So again, part of those workshops can help tease out, if this doesn't represent the current views of our community, what do we want it to look like and how do we want to change it, whether it's densities, whether it's open space, whether it's trails, whether it's circulation patterns. Those are things that we can address through that process.
I just wanted to say I'm a 22-year resident of Fairfax on Bothene Road. I love the town I live in, and I wouldn't want to change anything about it. One of the proposed Olima Road parcels in my neighborhood, a lot of the issues that have been raised about parking, traffic, will be scrutinized when the actual application is made for the development of the parcel. I don't know if I've got much more to add for the other commissioners, but I'd like to see if we could find ways to craft findings to help to recommend adopting the ordinance.
Just to clarify, you'd like to help find findings to
Yes.
to adopt the proposed ordinance or to adopt?
I'd like to adopt the general plan and the zoning changes that are proposed.
Okay. So you'd like to adopt the general plan and the zoning changes that are proposed? Is that, okay. So not repeal? Is that repeal. Not repeal? Okay.
I echo a lot of the comments about the involvement, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about affordable housing and traffic and all of those issues. And I respect that we are a community of diverse opinions around all of those issues. It's what was talked about for 12 years in developing the general plan. It's what should continue to be talked about in amending the general plan. I would love to see the town have a regular standing community town hall every year to talk about the vision for our town going forward and do as much as we can with banners and posters and social media and what have you, and food and music, to invite everybody into those kinds of conversations around the vision for our town and housing and what we want it to look like and who we want to be. I wanted to address this issue of the people, by the people, and for the people, and how this process unfolds, and who are the people that are or are not showing up for this. Who are the citizens that the referendum represents, or the citizens that the general plan represents? We, up here, are all volunteer citizens. You are citizens. The Affordable Housing Committee are citizens. They all showed up. The Volunteer Committee are all citizens. They all show up. The Open Space Committee are all citizens. They all show up. So there are a lot of people who are showing up and who are volunteering and getting involved, citizens and people of Fairfax. So when we talk about things like workshops won't really represent the citizens of Fairfax, or this represents the citizens of Fairfax and that doesn't, I think all of those represent the citizens of Fairfax. We all have diverse ideas. But we need to have our conversations in respectful, open, transparent, public dialogue. And I think what's complicated this conversation is that hasn't been allowed to happen, and it's gotten very confusing by the start again, stop again, start again, stop again. We're going to talk about it on April, whatever. Oh no, we can't talk about it on April because something else got in our way for talking about it. And so I think that on again, off again public dialogue process has added to a lot of confusion. And there's a difference between wanting to be heard and wanting to be agreed with. I think we should all be heard, and we should all talk with each other and try to achieve consensus. But at the end of the day, we can be heard and not agreed with. And because of the way our democracy works, we have chosen to appoint and to elect people who have the tough role of listening to everybody and then making a decision that we might not agree with. But just because we're not agreed with doesn't mean we weren't heard. And one of the things that I find about sitting up here at these meetings and listening to people come and talk, and people like, oh, people just talking. I said, no, people come with really good information, and they affect our decision-making process. And sometimes people come with their personal opinion that I don't agree with. They too affect our process. They were heard, but I don't agree with them. And sitting up here, I have the responsibility for making decisions. So I think that's a distinction that's very important. And just because you aren't agreed with, I don't think that we should then enter into a different kind of public process where we try and force the town to agree with you. So I am all in favor of continuing the public process and having open, transparent community dialogues with people who I may not agree with. I am not for a public process that takes place through legal and political pressure. And I think that's part of what's convoluted our conversation. And I'm going to stop there, and I'll probably think of something else to say.
Commissioner Lamont.
I knew I should have gone first. Darn. I have a lot of disparate thoughts that I'm just going to throw out there. Shelley spoke so eloquently, and Esther and Roxanne hit a lot of the points that I wanted to discuss. But I would like to say again that we are the public too. We are spending many hours away from our families to do this because we love Fairfax too. And we're putting a lot of brain power into it, and we're putting a lot of energy into it. And we really, truly hope that that it is a dialogue. And it's sometimes a little disheartening to come to Planning Commission and see all those chairs empty. And I'm really glad you're here tonight, because I'm really glad to hear what you have to say. And I wish you would come more often, because I learned so much tonight from just how people are feeling. So, again, some of it I agreed with, some of it I didn't, but I learned a lot, and I appreciate you being here. So I take a little exception to the idea that the workshops are unrepresentative, because they're not. They're just not. We are the public too. Today in the IJ and recently in the Chronicle, there was an interesting article about a poll about the housing crisis in the Bay Area. It's not just Fairfax, it's in the Bay Area. It's in California. And it was really interesting to see that 77% of the people polled supported affordable housing, but only 30% of them polled wanted it in their neighborhood. These are the same people, and we can't talk out of both sides of our mouths. That's just not okay. This is an ethical issue too. We have teachers at the elementary school that we're going to lose because they can't afford to live in Fairfax. Those are people educating our children, and they're amazing people. We have a music teacher who comes from Vallejo now because he couldn't afford to be here. And he still comes here to educate the kids of Fairfax and teach them amazing music. And if you've never seen the White Hill Jazz Band, you're missing out. So I think we have a public responsibility, an ethical responsibility, to look beyond our own backyard and take a look at climate change. Denser housing does mean less people coming from Vallejo to Fairfax. More affordable housing in Fairfax, closer to the transit lines, no matter whether you agree with transit-oriented development or not, people will use public transportation, and that is the trend. If you do any research at all into the trends of housing, people are looking for smaller units that aren't as expensive. Cars are expensive. We give up so much real estate downtown to our cars. We have a walkable town. If people could walk to our town, they would walk to our town. If housing was close to those arteries and to those centers, people would walk to our town. We'd need a bigger place for our farmers market because it would be so popular. It already is. So the last thing I want to say is people have said a lot tonight, and there's a discussion about we need to slow things down and we need to discuss it. And there's been a lot of discussion, and slowing this process down at this point means going backwards. It means living with a zoning ordinance that's out of compliance with the state of California. We cannot pick and choose the laws we comply with. We need to comply. So I'm not really ready to go backwards. We've gone a long way to get to the point where we have a really good general plan and a flexible document and the ability to change what we don't like, but going backwards isn't the way to do it. So there I got all emotional. But I think Fairfax is a microcosm of all of these issues. We have a really, really forward-thinking staff. We are so lucky to have the staff that we have. We have, I'm going to gush, but I mean, really, the innovative, thoughtful, context-driven planning that is going on in our staff in Fairfax right now is to be commended and to be appreciated, and I think that I would like for more people to know how lucky we are to have this staff, because if we didn't have this guidance, we would just be stuck with old ordinances that don't address our problems. We'd be legislating by variance, and it's not a good way to go. And we're on the right road, and I don't want to get off it right now. I'm sorry. So I think there are ways to have these public workshops. I love the idea of having a regular town meeting. I'm from New England. We used to close the schools on town meeting day. Everyone went to town meeting. I mean, it was in the gym at the high school because everyone went to town meeting. I think that's an amazing idea. So there are ways through this to make this a much more transparent process, a more accessible process, but shutting it down right now is not that way. I'm sorry, I just don't think so.
Thanks. So I think I like to reflect as well. I've actually been on the commission now for almost 8 years. Commissioner Hamilton, almost 8 years. Commissioner Lamont, 6.5. These folks over here have been for 2 or 3 years now. So still newbies, but came from other like design review and other sides. So I think what I actually cherish about this commission is when I started on this commission, there was divisiveness, there was yelling, there was people get up in front of the dais, and it was not a very professional scene. I think we have dialogue, we have disagreement, and we have a collegial relationship where we can have this dialogue. I appreciate everybody here tonight. I felt the same way. Everybody was respectful, everybody presented their perspective, and I think it was important to hear everyone's perspective. I have to say, I was watching the testimony on May 7th as well. It was actually uplifting to me to hear the breadth of perspectives that people had. the compassion and the passion that people have. Personally, what I am trying to figure out is what can we do that's best for this town to accomplish the objectives laid out thoughtfully with great effort by the community. How do we honor that? How do we move forward in the best manner that doesn't sacrifice the Christ Lutheran Church opportunity, that doesn't sacrifice other development opportunities, and at the same time doesn't prevent us from being able to continue having conversations, to continue being a community. There were many years where we conducted workshops that nobody came to, and it was very disappointing. I would like to, and we as a body have had a number of workshops, and it's always invigorating for us as well to hear that dialogue, to be able to not have 10 things on the agenda, but to be able to have one thing and actually have a dialogue and a discussion and dig into that specific topic. And it's been a while. I think I expected that we would be doing that with this general plan once we got through it, and it sounds like we will be, regardless of which way it goes here. When I look at, when I compare the resolutions, and I think it's really important to look at this. When I look at the resolution that was actually supported and adopted by the town council in March, there were there's always whereases at the beginning of a resolution, and I never knew what they meant, but they actually lay out what's the rationale and what's the basis for being able to make and proceed and move forward and justify the decision that's being made. And I think it's important to actually think about what this means. Ordinance 778, whereas the general plan includes figure LU1 and figure LU2, which, and I'm going to read it out because we just have to do those things, both of which include public domain and central commercial zones, and neither of which include a commercial highway zone. And whereas the general plan land use program, LU 7.1.1.2, and just so you know, anytime it's one of those numbers, it's in this general plan. These are all references to directives out of the general plan. So Land Use Plan 7.1.1.2 directed that all properties within the town zoned as commercial highway be rezoned to central commercial. And whereas general plan land use element LU 8.1.1.3 and housing element program H2.1.1.2 directed that real property commonly known as 10 Olima, and it lays out the assessor parcel, be rezoned to planned development district. And whereas general land use element program 8.1.1.14 and housing element H2.1.1.1 directed that the real property commonly known as 2626 and 2600 Sir Francis Drake be rezoned to planned development district. And whereas, and I can keep reading, there's two more of these that refer to specific parts of the general plan. Those are all the rationales and the basis for adopting a resolution related to the adoption of the rezoning, the map, and the specific language changes that were included at that time. The resolution that's proposed in the packet for us to consider tonight is a repeal of that ordinance. And the whereas that ties to the town plan, it says that if this repeal is adopted, it is consistent with objective TC 2.1, which is to work with the community to maintain and enhance the historic character of the town center area, which is that's one of the justifications. And the other one is that housing element program H1.1.1.3 is to conduct community outreach. Those are the only two justifications from the town general plan that would justify adoption of this ordinance to repeal Ordinance 778. And the reason I bring that up is that there is a breadth of thought and ideas and looking at how to be consistent with the town general plan. That's what Ordinance 778 did. The repeal there are very limited findings that are available to proceed with that. That said, we're asked to look at the regulatory and the law and ignore the politics and the legal proceedings that may or may not happen. And I go back to asking that question, how do we best achieve the objectives of the town, the community? How do we not lose the opportunities such as Christ Lutheran Church? What is the best and most efficient and judicious way for the town to be able to move forward and achieve the objectives that we've all laid out? And I haven't heard huge disagreement in the big things like supporting affordable housing. There's concern about traffic, but there's a traffic study that's been done, and I would encourage anyone who's got concerns to actually look at the traffic study, because that has been adopted. That's been reviewed by the town council, and that's available actually on the, I found it on the website today in about 2 minutes from the town council website. So I don't know what the right answer is. I am wrestling with it, but I do think that we as a commission, whatever decision we're making is in the best interest of achieving the objectives that have been laid out in the general plan, but navigating how we get there. I think nobody is disagreeing with workshops. Nobody is disagreeing with, I mean, I'd love to see the schedule right now on the agenda for the workshops. I think when we're talking about the workshops, we really are talking about tweaking the information that's in the housing element, and to me that would lead to a new housing element that we're going to have to go through a process. So it's not just a simple quick tweak that is going to, we're just going to be able to move along. We would have to then tweak all of those elements. The housing element, when we talk about 174 units, a portion of those are achieved through the conversion from CH to CC. A portion of those are achieved through the PDD conversions, and a portion of those are achieved through other means. So doing one thing but not the other doesn't mean that we're meeting the objectives and the requirements of the state to meet the housing element needs, we would no longer be meeting the state's review of the housing element, and we would then have to submit a new housing element with a new proposal. So while we can talk about and say we can make it quick and we can do it quickly, I don't actually see in terms of the process that we could get there that quickly. And the reason I've reiterated that we have revised the general plan is because we have. And I don't know that anybody in this room understood that when we started this discussion tonight. I haven't heard that in any of the other presentations and any other meetings. But that's exactly what we did in October of 2013. The town council unanimously adopted that. They unanimously adopted the CEQA review, the traffic study. So to me, there was a vote last month that was a split vote, but it didn't necessarily undo all of those other commitments that the town council has also made and the other the adoption of other ideas. I would understand this if we were being directed to repeal 778 and go back and revise the housing element and lay out the timeline and what it really means, because I think that is the way that it actually will be having to work out. So those are sort of my opening comments. If we have any questions for staff, I think we need to get some questions out, or we're just having a discussion.
I just wanted to tear off of what you said in terms of how can we move forward and meet the stated requests of the public and the town council in this process. And so what I heard throughout this whole process, not just tonight, from the town council and from comments, and I went back and I listened to the March 5th meeting, and I listened to the April meeting and May meeting, and took copious notes. And what I heard as the agenda of the various folks who came to speak and the town council were three different things. The first thing that came out in the March meeting was the precipitating issue, shall we say, that came out in the March meeting had to do with errors and language that might not have been as tight as it could be, that would lead to unintended consequences on parcels that weren't supposed to be impacted. So that was what came out in March. Subsequent to that, there was then further another agenda issue, which was this issue around public process, creating better information. Had we known, we really want to know, we want to be involved on a policy level. So the first issue was not a policy level. The first issue that came out was a technical, administrative, fixing text kind of issues. Let's make sure we don't open ourselves up to unintended consequences. The second issue was public wants to be involved in the policy. So again, this is the policy level. Public wants to be involved in the policy level and have more conversation around policy, clear and transparent and open dialogue around policy, various bits and pieces. The third issue that I heard come out at these meetings, again, kind of subsequently as it unraveled or unrolled, was that there was some sentiment in the town that we ought to be rebelling against state and regional housing quotas and housing policies, and not that just we want to strengthen or assist the housing element, and we want to work on it even at a policy level. So the first part is work on it at a technical level. The second level is work on it from a policy level. And then the third level is ditch it all together because we don't want to have to comply. So I heard those kinds of three layers of conversation, and it was interesting that those three layers rolled out as the conversation rolled out. So I'm just going to read what, and so tonight, when we don't use nouns and we use pronouns like it, we don't quite know what we're talking about. So there were things like, there was a 3-2 vote, and the town council, and it needs to be redone or changed, or that needs to be fixed, or it, what are we talking about? So if we go back to the March meeting, the it at the March meeting that was being addressed was the PDD issue and the potential unintended consequences. And the motion that was made for continuance at the March meeting was, and I quote Larry Bragman, to make a motion to continue for 1 month. This is before this conversation about large community meetings and we need to talk about this more. It was a motion to continue for 1 month for April with direction to the staff to drill down on the PDD issue and see if there is any issues with it being overly inclusive. So that was the direction in March that was given. That was the issue in March, was this very one specific language technicality thing that we wanted to make sure we didn't overlook. Great thing to do, perfectly fine thing to do. Now, that language that was discussed about the PDD was in here, not in here. So corrections to PDD language or tightening it up to make sure that we were only referencing the opportunity site PDDs, not all PDDs and existing PDDs. That was in here. The PDD process for how projects get approved, that's in this book right here. That was there before March, it was there after 778, and it's there whether or not we repeal or keep 778. The fact that PDDs prior, which worked great, as we've heard from folks, the PDD process works. You have to do a master plan, you have to do a specific plan, and you have to do a permit. All of those have public process where people can come and say, Olema doesn't work for me, I want to talk about Olema in the master planning or the specific planning. That was there, that is there, that stays there. We can go back and change it if it doesn't work, but right now it's there. In the town code, I'm pointing at the town code. So that was March. So March was these technicality issues. So when we talk about the town council wants it to be redone or it changed, in March what the town council was talking about was maybe we ought to go look and see if that specific technical issue ought to be done or rechanged. it was decided at that meeting, yes, we can do that. The motion that was passed was, we don't need to repeal it to do that. So the motion that was passed also directed staff to pretty much do exactly the same thing as the motion to continue, which was, let's continue down this path because this thing doesn't have the PDD language in it that's at fault. This thing has the PDD language that's the problem. So let's keep this thing and direct staff to come back with this thing around the PDD language. So the motion that was passed in March was just to keep Ordinance 778, but directed staff to come back the next month, the very next month, not a long drawn out thing, but come back the very next month and address that specific issue. When it came back the next month and the public got, what's going on? There's something going on around housing, and people were informed. They came back, and that's when this next layer came up, which was around the public process. And we really don't know what's going on, and there's this petition out there that I was asked to sign, and I'm confused, and whoa, wait a minute, we need more public process, we need more public process. So the request, in April, was around public process, slow it down, repeal it. And in fact, the town council had been poised to do just that. They realized, wait a minute, we have these technicalities, we need to deal with it, let's put it back on the agenda and deal with those. Unfortunately, they were precluded from dealing with the issues that had been addressed in March, in April, those issues of unintended consequences. So they couldn't take any action to deal with those issues. What we then had was public comment, which got larger. And that's where the public comment got larger into public process, traffic, parking, water, all those things that live in here. Again, the conversation in April was not about the map. It was about traffic and parking and affordable housing. They couldn't make a decision that night because the referendum had been filed. And so that was also where this whole issue of rebelling against the housing quotas came out. Then in May, it really became this, we should rebel against the housing quotas. And the folks who in March were talking about fixing things and making sure that everything was all fine, were now saying, let's throw it out and rebel against housing, the housing quotas. Whole different request shows up in May than showed up in March. So when we talk about what it is that the town council wants us to deal with, I heard that I heard lots and lots of wonderful speeches by the town council, including the folks that voted to repeal, supporting the general plan, supporting the housing element. There was a lot of support verbally given for all of this, even by the folks who voted to repeal. Because what I heard was that they wanted to repeal it for were the technicalities and the tightening up of the language. I am all for that. I think we should move forward. If I was going to direct staff tonight, I don't think that we should repeal this because that's not where any of the problems or errors or unintended potential consequences live. It lives in here and we need to deal with it. If I was going to direct staff time to focus its energy and our time and town council's time, I say, let's fix the things that might create unintended consequences in here. Let's focus on that. And the other more important thing is let's focus on listening to the community on those policy issues. We can open that conversation up again and have those conversations. Let's not waste our time repealing something that, from what I can tell, has every intention of later being reinstated. Pretty much as it is on this piece of paper. Things in here might get tweaked a little, but the ordinance itself is basically just saying change this from CL to PDD, change this from CH to CC. We can argue about what ought to happen in CC. Do we want parking regulations of this or that in the CC? But that's in the town code, and that's another subsequent conversation that I do think should roll out in a stepwise manner. I completely agree with staff's recommendation that the next conversations should happen in a much more stepwise manner. I just don't think that we have to repeal this in order to do all of that.
Okay, I do want to, I actually have a couple questions of staff, and I'd like to ask. One question that I have is, have you thought about that process? How substantive do you, it seems like with the housing element, all of these comments are not mistakes anymore. The comments we heard tonight are beyond mistakes. So have you thought about what the timeline is, what the process would be for the recertification of a housing element, the costs of doing that? It's not the loss of a grant, it's actually real costs out of pocket to do a new study on the traffic study or do other things. So can you give us a little bit of information about what that would mean for us to go back and do that? It's not that we shouldn't, it's just I want to have that information.
Well, maybe I could break it down. It's more simple from our perspective. Our perspective was the council directed staff that we would conduct the workshop, or call it a forum town hall meeting in July. And based on that, on education and outreach, that might develop a list of issues or concerns that the council may want to address. The idea is we would package it up, bring it back to another council meeting, and then the council could have a discussion of, okay, narrowing it down for what it'd like to do, and then direct staff to go back through the process. If they said amending something, let's say in the general plan, a policy, or the housing element, then we would do that process. So depending on what it is, it's difficult to say what exactly that would mean in terms of the housing element or general plan. But it is clear that it is a general plan. If it is a general plan amendment and not just a zoning change, that there is a process and it would take a while, and it could require some SQL analysis, maybe not, could require some discussions with HCD, maybe not. And so, but you're correct. It would take a while. It would go back through the planning commission. And I don't even know if the council may want, if it came up with this list, to have another town hall meeting to talk about the list and talk about different steps. So it would take a while. But the first step really would be the workshop in July, and that would probably drive what the next steps would be. But it'd be a meeting in July, and then probably a meeting with the council at a regular council meeting to talk about the meeting in July and what the next steps are. I hope that helps the commission.
Yeah, no, and I think what I'm hearing is that the council would be able to take information in and actually direct staff to address X, Y, and Z, not, they could pick and choose and have an understanding of what the ramifications might be as they make those recommendations.
Yeah, I would say it's accurate assessment.
And I guess the other question I have is, have you, as the town, reached out to the state to have a dialogue about where we are in this process? Do they understand where we are in this process and why we might take specific actions either way in terms of the ordinance and then the proposed repeal?
I would say at this point, while we have filled out our report, our annual report to HCD a few weeks ago, prior to somewhat all this process, at this point we believe it's somewhat premature on what's going to happen because we're not sure what's going to happen. The game plan is to restart, which means that we would go back through the process, and it may be we end up in the same place, just a longer period of time. It's also conceivable we don't end up at the same places that would require substantial amendments to any of the documents and a discussion with HCD. But we're not quite there yet.
So another question is, given the testimony we've heard tonight and to the town council, is it possible as part of a repeal to recommend as an additional item the adoption of PDD for the Christ Lutheran Church parcel as part of the repeal resolution? I know that's picking and choosing.
Yeah, I think yes. I'm sorry.
I think that's what I'm trying to get at is, the town council was given a choice to repeal in full or repeal parts. They chose to recommend starting a process to repeal parts. In full. There's a resolution that's been proposed in a proposed ordinance, which is a draft, which we have the ability to modify. If we were to modify it and add it, look at this as a condition, it's still a repeal, but we're adding a condition that is proceeding with adoption of PDD for Christ Lutheran Church. Is that actually possible to do as part of this process tonight. It was noticed, it's part of the PDD. We were asked to proceed with repeal in its entirety, but if we put that one element in, does it then raise an issue with if the petition is certified, it goes to a vote, all of those things. Even that one single element could be prevented from being able to move forward for a year if there were something through the resolution or the ordinance, not the referendum process.
So I think our recommendation as staff would be, as a planning commission, obviously you could either adopt a resolution supporting the repeal, or you can come up with an alternate resolution that would not support the repeal, and obviously our planning and building services director can help you with that and the findings that you could adopt for that. I think the issue as it relates to the senior housing project, I don't think we would suggest you actually put that in any resolution. What we can do is when we report back to the council your recommendation, we could also attach the minutes and make a statement to the fact that the planning commission is very supportive of that project, and perhaps the council would want to consider taking just the rezone for the church project as a PDD, as a separate zoning action, along with whatever zoning text language is required for the PDD to allow that project. And so that would be a much cleaner process, because as Jim Moore stated, is that with the rezone of the PDD to the church property, it was always envisioned that we would come back with the zoning text changes really to allow that project, to make it, to lack of a better term, perhaps to make it so it's easier for that affordable housing portion to be developed as opposed to go through how PDD is listed right now. As Commissioner Hamilton had pointed out, there is the master plan, specific plan, precise plan, I forget. There's 3 steps it has to go through, as well as all these other things. But we always envisioned we would have to come back with text changes to really allow that project to move forward. So in any case, if the recommendation, our suggestion would be we would just pass on the Planning Commission's recommendation that the council take a separate zoning action to allow that. Whether or not the separate legal issue related to the petition and other issues, that's more of a legal matter. But I think your recommendation is sound if you wanted to just recommend that to the council, that it just proceed on a separate path for the senior project.
Just again, for process, isn't it possible the commission could ask staff to bring a draft ordinance forward on that specific issue for our next meeting? Do we have to wait for the town council to recommend that? Isn't that something we have it's in the housing elements. Is that something we could request?
Yes, you can request that.
That would be a separate, it wouldn't be tonight, but it would be a separate request.
Right.
Whether it's waiting for, 2 weeks.
Right.
To make the recommendation for town council, then to make it back to us for our meeting, and then, it just sort of.
I think the difficulty is it's a little confusing because PDD, it's currently zoned PDD, so to bring back, rezone a PDD, since it's already zoned PDD, we'd just be coming back with the text changes. But once the repeal takes effect... I was assuming
there would be a repeal, but
once the repeal takes effect, then we could do that.
Even under the repeal, it's 90 days of process.
Yeah, it's a little... it makes it more convoluted and confusing just from when things take effect.
Right.
But I think we get the idea of to expedite it so that the timing works that you could take action.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for staff? Okay. Go ahead, comment.
So I think my comment, I'm also not in support of repealing Ordinance 778. I think, again, what was in that ordinance was to get our zoning map adopted and in line. I was at some of the town council meetings. I've watched them all, even the one I had attended before, Commissioner Hamilton. I took copious notes, and everything that I've been hearing deals with if and when the development ever takes place, and the development may never take place, but if and when, it's about mitigating some externalities, it's about putting parameters in place, and that would come back here in the Planning Commission process. The other issues I'm hearing focus on the bigger general plan, which wouldn't be addressed here in the repeal of the ordinance. It goes back to make changes to the general plan 4 times a year to get those changes in place. So I look at repealing the ordinance as, I think Shelby Lamont was commenting, it's a step backwards to start a whole process of not getting us where we need to go. And what we have in place has some tweaks that need to be done, and that can certainly be done going forward without repealing this, and then working on the housing element or the general plan in general, talking about circulation and transportation issues and some other issues. And that's a great discussion to have. It took 12 years to get here. That doesn't mean that going forward we can't meet more frequently and fix this more frequently to represent the needs.
Okay, so I think we've heard from everyone, and I guess the real question we need to ask staff is, for us to, given the temperature of the folks up here, we're going to need to craft an alternative resolution. Do we have to craft an alternative ordinance and resolution, or is it one in the same? I know they're different things. There's a resolution, a draft ordinance and a draft resolution in front of us. Would we have to draft?
No, just a resolution recommending denial. And I have a boilerplate resolution recommending denial, which only is missing the findings, which we would recommend to make as simple and succinct as possible. And you might find language in the prior resolution and or ordinance when you adopted it in terms of compliance, bringing the zoning ordinance into compliance with the general plan via as prescribed by law. It could be as simple as that, the finding.
Okay. So,
yeah. So I can actually, if you would like, I could read for the record the draft ordinance resolution to not adopt, and then you get the flavor, and there'll be a blank spot, which is the part to fill in. Would you like me to read that in the record?
I think. Are you okay? Do you have a question first?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question first.
Yes, I think that would be helpful. And what I would like to recommend to keep it as simple as possible with respect to that is I might suggest that we've talked about a number of things that we break our action tonight into 2 parts. One is the resolution with respect to repealing the ordinance or not, which sounds like we're recommending not repealing it. And then have a second action to recommend and or support additional actions aside from the repeal or the not repeal, and so that we don't get the 2 things confused. So things like that we recommend that we support the town hall, or whatever kind of other actions that we would like to either recommend or support, but that we keep those separate so that we that we just focus on the resolution. So.
Okay. All right. Resolution number blank, a resolution of the Fairfax Planning Commission recommending the town council not adopt ordinance number so-and-so. Whereas on March 5th, the Fairfax Town Council adopted ordinance number 778, thereby amending various sections of the town zoning ordinance, Fairfax Town Code Title 17, as well as the town's zoning map. And whereas on May 7th, 2014, the Town Council voted to start the process to repeal Ordinance 778, and whereas the staff of the Town of Fairfax has thus prepared Ordinance number blank, which would effect the repeal of Ordinance 778, and whereas, pursuant to the State Planning and Zoning Law, California Code Section 65000, any revisions to a zoning ordinance must first be considered by the Planning Commission for its recommendation on the same to the Town Council. And whereas under Government Code 65855, the Planning Commission's recommendation to the Town Council on any amendment to the zoning ordinance must include the reasons for the recommendation, as well as the relationship of the proposed ordinance or amendment to applicable general and specific plans. And whereas on Thursday, May 29th, 2014, at a duly noticed special meeting of the Planning Commission of the Town of Fairfax, the Planning Commission did consider proposed ordinance number blank, heard a report on the same from staff, took and considered public comment on the matter, made findings, and formulated a recommendation to the Town Council. Now, therefore, be it resolved as follows. Section 1. The Planning Commission forwards proposed ordinance number blank, repealing ordinance number 778 to the Town Council with its recommendation that the Town Council not adopt the ordinance. Section 2. The Planning Commission makes the recommendation to the Town Council because blank. Get ready, Shelley. Section 3. The Planning Commission finds that ordinance number blank does not comply with the Town of Fairfax 2010 to 2030 general plan because blank. The foregoing resolution was duly introduced and adopted on May 29th, 29th day of May 2014 by the following votes. I would be glad to repeat section 2 and 3 again, the blanks, if you like.
No, I was just going to say for the public out there, all of those whereases that he just read, because I know you all are not as minutia oriented as we might be up here. Those whereases were all the whereases from the original proposal as well. There wasn't anything different than what he read than what was on the document that was provided in the packet. So the original packet for us tonight to approve repealing, those whereases were all the same. So to keep it simple, I would suggest we just reiterate the whereases and the justification that was used when we approved Ordinance 778. They haven't changed. And so from our original packet for approving Ordinance 778, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whereases that seem applicable, and whether or not we also need to add in whereases around the subsequent process of, whereas on January 30th, the Planning Commission, after taking public testimony, unanimously recommended adoption of Ordinance 778, whereas on February something, the Town Council heard a first reading on adopting Ordinance 778, took public testimony, and unanimously approved the first hearing. You might add that you weren't listening, were you?
So again, I think it could be boiled down to more generic stance. Let me just. Do you want to? No, go ahead. Okay. So again, let me just repeat the section 2 and 3 that have blanks to it for a moment, and maybe you could refer to your ordinance that was passed and/or the resolution back on January 30th.
That's what I was doing.
Okay. So maybe Joanne, could you please keep close track of this for the record? And so section 2 says, the Planning Commission makes this recommendation to the Town Council because.
So what you're asking is if it seems like at that point, if we wanted to add the whereas, essentially
you don't have to say
those
whereas.
findings could
it's
go
not a
there.
Whereas.
But it's the findings that are out of the original.
I can take the word whereas out and just use the statement afterwards, if that makes it easier.
The Planning Commission makes this recommendation to the Town Council because.
Because this process has gone through a public hearing process, because we are complying with state law, because it currently meets the goals and objectives of the general plan of the town of Fairfax. To start.
I personally think that covers the basis. Let me go on to the next section, if I may. Section 3, the Planning Commission finds that ordinance number blank does not comply with the town of Fairfax 2010 to 2030 general plan because.
Because the plan includes figure LU blah blah blah, because the plan I mean, do you want me to read all of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Pick the most succinct.
Well, if you'd like, I have a copy, so if you just want to say, when you say LU, then I'll know which one, whereas. You don't have to read the whole thing, because I have the same thing.
Sure, I'm just pulling the elements, the statements out from the original approval of Ordinance 77. So because the general plan, the paragraph around LU1, the paragraph around LU 7.1.2. So what I'm doing is I'm saying it doesn't abide by the general plan because the general plan includes a provision to include a public domain zone, because the general plan says that we are supposed to convert CH to CC, because the general plan says that we are supposed to rezone Tenolima to a PDD. I would suggest doing the specific language because the general plan says that we are to rezone Lutheran Church to a PDD, because the general plan land use says that we are to rezone School Street Plaza to a PDD. And my only friendly amendment, Shelby, to yours would be on the first part around California Government Code 65860C, requiring towns and cities to amend. This isn't, I'm sorry, I'm jumping backwards. That one would be in the because part, not the reference to the general plan part. So
it might be easiest if we simply number the whereases on Resolution 778 and then identify numbers, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you'd be able to translate that across, drop the whereas and put in because. I think that, I've listened to all sides, and I really do value input from town staff. And as I said earlier, I think this is a process I think we're proceeding with based on the temperature. I do want to hear rationale. I haven't seen it in the staff report, and I haven't heard it tonight, rationale to not proceed this direction in terms of the risk to the town, in terms of the opportunity for the town. I don't know if I would like to give you an opportunity to, as the town manager, if you
I think pretty much I think the staff report covered what the council's direction was, but it is up to the planning commission to decide as what you believe to be appropriate, and your actions you're taking, I think that's fine. I don't think you really need more from staff in terms of what the council was thinking or why we recommended it a certain way. I think what you're doing is fine and appropriate for the planning commission, and we would just pass that on to the council.
Right. And I guess not being purview to other discussions and risk to the town. That was my question, is the risk to the town. We're not purview to any of those. I know you are. I know the town council is. We're proceeding as the body that we are. But I do it with understanding that there are things that we don't know, and I would hope that if there were things we didn't know that we should know, that we were creating a great risk for the town, that we would be informed of that. So.
Oh, okay. I think if it helps, the planning commission is making a recommendation to the council, but the council is making the actual decision. So the risk is different than if the planning commission was the sole body making the decision.
Thank you for that clarification.
Do you have anything to add on the ordinance part of it?
No, and I think we with the video record and with the notes we have here, I think we're okay with what you were inserting in section 2 and 3 of the alternative resolution. So I think if you were ready to make when you're ready, if you're ready, when you're ready, or whatever, that I think we got it.
So just because I think all the recommendations were in the body, I'm reading the title and wanting to make sure. So the title would need to be modified, that the resolution of the Fairfax Planning Commission I guess it would be to not adopt the recommendation of town council. Is that how it would be worded?
Not repealing ordinance 778.
Okay, so resolution of
the way it's written right now, it says, a resolution of the Fairfax Planning Commission recommending the town council not adopt ordinance number so-and-so.
Okay. Thereby repealing. So we don't need to change the thereby because the other item this is a resolution referring to a draft ordinance. We're not modifying this draft ordinance. We're simply modifying the resolution, referencing this draft ordinance and saying not to adopt it as opposed to adopt
No,
it.
no, you're recommending not adopting the ordinance to repeal 778.
Which is this draft that's in our packet that doesn't have a number. So we don't need to make any modifications to that draft ordinance. We're simply changing the recommendation or the resolution, but the references are still the same.
Correct. The ordinance to repeal is now moot for you.
Okay.
I have
Go ahead.
The other because statements that I might suggest adding in.
In which section?
In the because section.
In section 2 or section 3? Section 2 or section 3?
Section 2.
Got it.
In section 2 is because on January 13th, on January 30th, make sure I have the right date. On January 30th, the Planning Commission, after taking public testimony, unanimously recommended adoption of Ordinance 778. And I would also like to add that because on February, fill in the blank, February 13th, the Town Council heard a first reading of Ordinance 778, and after taking public testimony unanimously, what do you say after first reading? Unanimously approved the first reading of ordinance? Is it they approve the reading or they approve the ordinance?
Well, actually what they do is they introduce the ordinance by title only.
So they didn't actually take an action that night?
That is the action, because you need the first reading, and in the second reading they actually adopt the ordinance.
So they completed the first reading.
That's correct.
After taking public testimony. There. I would just add those two. And I do have other recommended additional recommendations or actions, but I don't know if we want to do that after we make a motion, or do we want?
So I think the question I have is because we have this item on the agenda, can we make a second motion on other things that are pertinent to this discussion?
Correct me if you think of it different, Gary, but I think you're on the right track. Deal with the resolution you've crafted to recommend the council not adopt the ordinance repealing 778. Get that done. We've got this understood and what you want to be in here. And then you're just going to make an advisory motion on the heels of this action on what you think the town council should move forward with as expeditiously as possible. And to just reiterate, as someone had mentioned, we already had at one point direction from you to get to see the central commercial language revised as soon as possible. And then we also had direction, I believe, in the March meeting with the council to get the planned district development language ready as fast as possible. So I think that might be an appropriate motion to revisit, is to move on with the prior recommendations to get the language updated in the central commercial and the planned district development, which dealt with the people that are in limbo in the CH as it goes to CC, which it is now, and also in terms of the any unintended consequences on existing planned district development properties, and get on. And that would be the fastest way to move on forward with dealing with a lot of the comments and concerns that were raised, particularly early on.
Okay, so it sounds like to make this most workable, what we've drafted or crafted remotely, virtually,
yes,
that will become something that would go forward is a motion on the resolution, and we're not actually going to make a motion on the ordinance. So it's a motion only on the resolution.
Correct.
Okay. As amended.
So I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution of the Fairfax Planning Commission recommending the town council not adopt ordinance number whatever. No, not adopt the included ordinance, which would repeal. So we not adopt an ordinance to repeal.
Right. And that resolution that you're making a motion to vote on, it was amended as you put forth earlier.
Amended as we put forth with section 2 and 3.
Thank you.
So we have a motion to not adopt the draft ordinance.
Not to recommend that the council
Not to recommend adopting, yes.
I second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Gonzalez? Aye. Vote carried unanimously.
Okay, the next item that it's not an item, but the heels of this action are recommendations that we'd like to
Don't
also
turn the TV
pass
off
along.
yet. Don't turn the TV off yet.
We would like to pass along recommendations to town council as we proceed here. I know that Commissioner Hamilton has a number. I think number one, first and foremost, is to proceed with the community workshops as proposed in the staff report. With respect to breaking up into manageable parts, what we're proposing is not to undo the zoning map, but to immediately proceed into fixing the errata and updating language to reflect and have that as an open community dialogue to update those, come up with the language that will then update our town code. Because right now we have a map, but we have the zone language that hasn't been changed. So, go ahead.
I have a question about that because I see that there are two different public process recommendations. I would break that maybe into two different things. One is the public process for coming up with the tightening up and strengthening the language in the text issues. And then there's another public process which is having a community forum on the housing policies, like a housing policy community forum where people can come up and talk about the housing policies and traffic and should we have 100 and X or 3 units or, those kinds of things. I think I support that we should have those. We should have one every year. But they're two kind of different processes. I don't know if we want to, were you seeing them as together? Or?
I guess what I'm seeing is that the discussion we're having is, as you identified, it would be great to have an annual town meeting around the general plan and sort of follow up. There is a general plan implementation committee, the GPIC, that was specifically tasked by the town council to implement the general plan. That body meets every month, which is also a forum for that general dialogue around all of these things. I do feel like what I've heard is there's questions about the housing element specifically, but as we would proceed, what I think would be really productive and actually helpful for people to understand is it's that crafting of the language of the town code. It's how do we reflect what's in the town, in these elements, and turn it into what becomes the town code. And making sure that I think doing that in a workshop forum would actually promote higher level of participation. And I think that's what I was trying to get at. I think because the other part is the update correction of the housing element. I think I actually see the housing element kind of as its own thing now based upon all the comments. And I think as soon as you dig into those questions, we're going to be talking about revision of the housing element. That's just my personal take. Whether with some of the things I heard tonight, I guess that's what I worry about. But at the same time, I think we do need to. I think what was missing from the process was the language that went with the map to provide clarity and certainty.
But I
and
agree.
That's the gap that we have.
I think that's the two steps. The first step is a revision to the general plan to tighten up the language, which is what back in our March meeting, what the town council March meeting was addressing. The second piece is a broader issue, both the housing element, but broader issues of the general plan of where do we need to make the next revisions to the general plan, whether it's town center element and traffic and circulation and affordable housing and all of that that can come out of one meeting. But the one meeting breaks it apart to the very semantic errata pieces that need to be fixed, but then the broader structure of, okay, let's take a look at revising the general plan, or what things are people not happy with. And I think that's an ongoing process, but we need to get that, I think we need to get that started now.
I wanted to reference a gentleman from the May 7th meeting. He recommended maybe doing some kind of bullet point list of, I don't know if he was talking about impacts or definitions of the general plan. Is that something that can happen? Maybe a list, breaking it down and saying, okay, this is the implication of this, and these are the effects. Something that is very easy to grasp. So, I think this general plan is intimidating to kind of carve into or to dig into. I just think maybe if we make it more simple and accessible, explaining kind of just like the synopsis of it.
I think that's one of the things we had intended to do in the general plan forum/workshop was try to break this down to where it's digestible.
Yeah, okay.
And just to back up a second, I think if I hear what sort of sounds like a consensus brewing here is that you favor going forward with the workshop as soon as possible. You favor revisions to the language within the housing element, the erratas, if you will, or any language tightening in the housing element. And then lastly, you feel that we should move forward as fast as possible with the actual text amendments in the central commercial and the planned district development sections of the town code, in the zoning ordinance, excuse me. Those 3 steps.
And I mean, I think what's, again, a lot of the zoning changes, which the housing element talks about density, but the zoning changes, like for example, CH to CC, that's not in the housing element. That's in the land use.
It's actually both.
So it's in both, but
yeah.
So we're not just talking about the housing
No,
element.
thank
some
you,
of these
thank you.
things.
That's
so I
right.
think
That's right.
It's actually, yes, there's the housing element that has to get certified, but it's in multiple places in here.
Right. And that's sort of also part of the sort of education process in the forum.
Right. Okay, so do we need to make that in the form of a motion, or is that something you can take forward?
Yes,
with?
I would make a motion to recommend that the council direct staff to move forward expeditiously with holding the general plan forum, amending the narrative language in the housing element, and amending the language in the central commercial and planned district development sections of the zoning ordinance. Right. 3 things: forum, the language in the housing element, and the language in the zoning ordinance.
Right. And the first 2 are new recommendations, and the language to those PDD and CHCC, we actually made those recommendations previously, so we will continue making those 2. So is there a motion to that effect? You got a question?
No, I was just going to put a forward to the motion that one of the reasons why we're making this motion is because while we voted not to adopt repealing Ordinance 777, so my motion would be, this would be the whereas, I guess, if you will, that whereas we voted not to adopt Ordinance 777, we do, 778, we do support staff's recommendation to allow for additional opportunity to engage the community, as was originally, that was one of the justifications for repealing, that we support that justification and that intent, and that we want to create additional opportunities to engage the community. And that is why we are compiling our recommendation not to repeal 778 with recommended actions to also move forward on actions that achieve the goal that was stated in repealing 778. So we agree with the goal, but not the means to get there. And so that's why we've bifurcated our action with the second recommendation in order to achieve the goal that we were trying to achieve. So that's my whereas preamble to a motion. A motion to recommend to the town council that it, one, move forward with a July town hall forum meeting on the general plan and the housing element, that it move forward expeditiously with amending the administratively amending the language in the housing element with respect to potential errors, typos, mistakes, and potentially unintended consequences with the language. So making type edits to tighten up the language.
That part is the zoning ordinance, I would say.
No, that part was the general plan language, the tables, and making sure that the
yes,
PDD,
thank you.
that everywhere it says PDD in the housing element, that maybe you put the word like opportunity site PDD, so that it's very clear that that's all it's referring to.
Okay.
That's in the housing element. So that's number 2, is amending the language in the housing element to tighten it up, make sure there's no errors. Number 3 is in the town code, this book. So the third recommended action is, again, to move forward very fast. Amending the town code zoning language in the central commercial, because there won't be any CH, in the central commercial, to do things like let the veterinarian place stay. It was not the intention to not have veterinarians in our town. So change that. And the PDD language in the town code so that it is as it is intended.
So that was a comprehensive motion. I'm not going to expect Joanne on the preamble. But,
it's recorded.
So there's a motion.
We got it.
With detail.
A second.
So a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Okay, so that covers the topic that we have on this agenda. Remind us our next meeting, just so we don't forget, since we're here. The 19th of June will be the next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.